report for a parking problem.
Foreign, you're 23.
Yes, that's 4, I'll get a 28 from one truck when you're ready.
Go ahead.
From one truck, white Lincoln X-ray 985 should come back up next.
So you had 2000 Patrick Spalding.
10-4. If you can just put a little note in something like that, I might not be leaving a note on his vehicle so they can remove it.
Rockingham 505. Enter victimism case for Athens. Complainant, soon to be ex, slashed her tires and has made threatening comments to her. She's concerned he might return.
Yeah, forgive this at 32.
10-4. You're assigned to a vandalism case in Athens. Did you copy the 505?
Yeah, 4. Look at that. No, 3 and Depot Street. Truck away at 35.
7435.
Down.
10-4.
You go 43 again.
143.
You go with that 43 you had. I didn't hear any, but I had jump looks like we do.
10-4. I just wanted to know if you should be put back 76 to Cabana Circle or to the subject's address.
Yeah, I'll be 23 back on that found property case, and I'll be 76 to the Williams Road address to see if I can find the owner.
10-4. 449 1120.
449 1121, thank you.
10-4.
Code 4. 4.
Rockingham 535.
You have a great college.
535.
Should be. You guys know if our woman who fucked into a house. I'll slide up that way.
Caller is now been able to close the front door. He's now pounding on the door, trying to get in now. About 5 foot, long dark hair, got tie-dye shirt on. Number 21 is on.
We have separation. Excuse me. All right. Hey, guys. Good evening. I wasn't expecting to be back so soon, but everybody was saying you got to do a show based on Turtle Boy's interview last night of the juror. So we're going to do that. And obviously, he did a 3-hour show, so I can't do a reaction to that. But people have been sending me clips. So I've got at least 15 clips. I haven't watched any of them yet. So we'll go over it together in a little while. But I did watch the whole show. It's actually the first time I've watched Turtle Boy for any length of time in a long time. I thought overall he did a good job, and I think it was very useful, and I hope to hell that lawyers from both sides are watching and learning, because lawyers made mistakes from both sides. Speaking of which, um, I totally forgot about this name, really, of this kind of uninteresting person, but people were just telling me just a little while ago that Roberta's talking about me again live. She can't generate her own content, I guess. So, but she gets everything weirdly wrong and unintelligent. So I put it on for 10 seconds just before I came on here. And she's playing a clip from my show from the other night. And if you guys saw the show, you may remember. So she's going into, because I just described how the lawyers from the defense team screwed up badly enough that I said I think Karen should get her money back. And then she goes, Roberta goes, well, you just said 2 minutes ago that they're like an all-star team of lawyers. That's right, I did. But if you had half a brain, Roberta, I shouldn't have to explain this again, since I explained it perfectly there. What I meant, what I said was, it's like two teams that make the Super Bowl. They obviously had to be excellent teams to make the Super Bowl. However, they get there and they both have a historically bad day, bad game plans, mistakes. That's happened before. And we saw just this most recent Super Bowl, one of the greatest dynasties of all time, the Kansas City Chiefs, came out with a bad game plan and screwed it up. And I talked about that. Now, maybe Roberta doesn't know what a game plan is or a Super Bowl. I don't know what she knows and what she doesn't. But I made that pretty clear. And I stand by that. And interestingly, Turtle, I think, might stand by it to some degree now, too. He may have already, but at least he's doing it publicly. The defense made a lot of mistakes. These were things that I said on my show a couple of nights ago, and I've said before. But the jury interview, that kind of came out, that there were things that the defense team, had they done them differently, there was at least a better chance that Karen would have actually got acquitted. So as hard as, I'm not trying to diminish how hard those people are. Those people worked, Yannetti and Jackson and Little. But the mistakes that they made were fundamental mistakes that really cost her any chance of being acquitted. And I pointed out what those mistakes were. And I think that came out again with the juror last night. But trying to portray good, decent, regular people, which are very similar types of people to the jurors. People, stable, rooted in their community, have decent careers, have a job, that the people on the stand, whether we're talking about the firefighters or the cops or the witnesses from the house, came across as just regular people. They certainly, whether you liked every one of those witnesses or not is besides the point. Because if you go to listen, you're Thanksgiving, let's say you have 15 people over your house and they're pretty much all family members. You probably don't like them all the same, right? Human beings are different. And you throw 20 people on the stand, some of them are going to rub you better than others. But they all none of them came across as criminals. None of them have a criminal history. Not really. None of them are schemers, and the other side is constantly trying to portray them as the great McAlbert crime family, trying to connect them to Whitey Bulger. It's insane. And the defense made the mistake. Now, if Alan Jackson was going to cross-examine someone who was, for instance, let's say he took on John Gotti as his client, some modern version of John Gotti. And he's going to cross-examine the state's key witness, Sammy the Bull Gravano. Alan Jackson would be brilliant at that. He's a brilliant cross-examiner. But what does being a brilliant cross-examiner mean? Well, the only way to really showcase your skills in something like that is to kind of rip the person apart on the stand, rip apart their credibility. Now, I think it's hard for Alan Jackson to not want to use that skill. That's what he's getting paid the big bucks for, right? He's not getting paid the big bucks to just go up there and ask simple, easy questions. So you got 9 weeks of trial. They're alternating, which lawyer is going to cross-examine. Even Little got to cross-examine some of them. But he's got that temptation to want to shred these people. That's a mistake. What is the point of shredding Allie McCabe? What is the point of shredding Matt McCabe? These are regular people. Jen McCabe, Katie McLaughlin. What does the jury think? Now, again, the jury, these aren't turtle riders. Well, I take that back. There were at least a couple turtle riders on that jury. But the goal, again, was not to convince a couple of turtle riders because, A, they were convinced by the time they tricked their way onto the jury, and B, in order to get an acquittal, you got to get 12 of them. So if you're going to go out there and try to present Katie McLaughlin as being an accomplice after the fact to murder, an accomplice to a conspiracy, you might win. That might resonate with a couple of turtle riders that you got onto the jury. But it's going to piss off most of the jury, most of the regular people. So that's a mistake. And the defense did way too much of that. And I think that kind of came across with this juror. We'll see if we can. I haven't looked at the clips that people sent me, so I don't know if that'll come across. And it's not like the juror, I don't want to put words in his mouth because he didn't actually say that. But he also didn't really say that his own personal reasonable doubt or anybody else's that he saw there was based on the shredding of any of those witnesses or the attacks on Jen McCabe or any of that stuff. So that doesn't, so just based on this juror's testimony, none of that attempting to take apart these witnesses helped them at all, not even a tiny percent. And there's a good chance if we talk to some of the other jurors who were a little bit less inclined towards the not guilty vote than this particular juror, then some of those other jurors were probably pretty upset. So I think it's a very reasonable thing. So there's no question as I laid out last night, the talent of that defense team. I don't know anything about Little's history. I'm sure she's fine. She's a little greener than the other guys, but David Yannetti was a guy who was obviously the top of his class in high school and college, did well enough in law, got into an elite college, got into a semi-elite law school. He went to BC, I think. I think he went to Bowdoin in Maine for undergrad. That's a good school, and he gets accepted right away into the prosecution's office for the Suffolk County DA. He's there for 10 years. He handles some big cases, including his last name was Curley, the 10-year-old boy that was killed by a couple of predators. And then after that, now he goes into his own private practice. And I've gone over at length on this case. I can't remember the name of a guy, but he managed to get this guy who had been in jail for 16 years, who had confessed to a murder, got him a new trial and then got him off. Won. So he's had he's had a lot of success, David Yannetti. Now, I don't know what goes on in between those moments. I think it's a grind of a job. And that's what I had been told by people that talked to him, that he was actually on the verge of retiring before this case because most of your clients are coming in through your website and most of them are going to be shit bums, wife beaters, rapists, drug dealers. I mean, what kind of people are coming through? Obviously, Karen searched DUI lawyer, so he's getting a lot. And Yannetti came up, so Yannetti's getting a lot of DUI cases. This is not fun stuff, right? This is not My Cousin Vinny. This is not A Few Good Men. This is the grind, the everyday grind of being a defense lawyer. It's very difficult and very tedious If you've been doing that for decades, you probably do get sick of it. So there's no question that David Yannetti is a very talented individual and a talented lawyer. Alan Jackson, I think by all accounts, and most people would agree, one of the top lawyers in the country. Handled a lot of big cases, and you could see how smooth he was on his feet. This guy, he is the best of the best. But they came in with a bad game plan. And I don't think there's really any argument with it. And I'm not sure if Turtle Boy would argue with it. He's going live at 8:30. You can check it out, and he'll tell you. But in fact, I'm going to go over. He's got a post here that I haven't read yet. He has a post with some advice to. All right, let's pull it up. And I haven't read it, so this is a longish post by Aidan Kearney, and it's on Twitter. All right, can we see that? All right, good. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger for you guys. No, that's about as big as I can make it. All right, sorry. But I'm going to read it to you anyways, because plenty of people find my voice either soothing or boring enough to go to sleep at night, like Nima and many other people. So speaking of going to sleep, I'm a little drowsy myself. Let me have a sip of coffee. Sorry, Tom Fleming. All right, guys. I'm going to do this post. I want to just talk a little bit about the thumbnail. The last two thumbnails, they're inspired by the Sex Pistols. Now, let me see if I can relate this somehow to Karen Reed. I am not sure yet, but I'll start talking about it, and that'll be the challenge to see if I can do it. All right. One of the interesting things. Now, I didn't. When I was in high school, which was in the from 80 to 84, the Sex Pistols were a phenomena for like from 75 to 77, maybe 78. They had one album. They became they didn't start the punk movement, but they inspired much of the punk rock movement. I was never a punk rock person. I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and we didn't have punk rock. That's one of the things about punk rock. They may like to identify with the working class, but they are very far from the working class. In order to wear a punk rock uniform, whatever it is, your leather jacket, your weird hair, or your alternative hair, the various piercings and stuff like that, that costs money. And in poor working class towns, nobody can afford to do that. And it would seem silly to those people to waste money on those things. Again, I'm not criticizing those things. I'm just saying where I grew up, it didn't exist. If you want to find punk back then, and maybe now too, but certainly for a long time, you got to go into the more wealthy suburbs where the kids are more spoiled and can afford that. And when they graduate from high school, mommy and daddy can take care of them. They don't have to worry about putting food on their table, so they can afford to kind of maintain that lifestyle. Working class people, that just doesn't exist. But so I wasn't really aware of it. I'd heard of the Sex Pistols when I was in high school, but it's not. And that was never, but a movement that I was interested in. But going back, I love looking at the history of music and the history of cultural phenomena. And so the Sex Pistols, their first big song was Anarchy in the UK. And it kind of inspired a lifestyle and a movement that went on for a long time. And it's actually a great song. But it was listening to Johnny Rotten, the lead singer, who wrote the lyrics to it. And Anarchy became their identity, is anarchy. The idea of they are anarchy personified. If you want to have change in the system, that requires people to reject all norms, I guess, certainly all authority. And that's how you can, it's a youthful, rebellious kind of thing too. And so the song begins, I am the Antichrist. I am an anarchist. I want to be anarchy. Just great lyrics, because Johnny Rotten, it personifies anarchy, which is unique, right? So I saw an interview, and he was talking about how as he's writing the lyrics, and again, he had no musical training, never been in a band before. None of those guys did. They were put together largely based on the way this kind of almost like a very early version of a boy band manager put them together, but it was based more on style of clothing they were wearing and how they looked and that kind of thing. And they threw them together and they said, all right, start making music. The guitarist ended up, Steve, what's his name, becoming a great guitarist, but he didn't know how to play at the time. And so Johnny Rotten is describing sitting in the corner while the other guys are trying to learn how to play the instruments, and he's trying to learn how to write his first song. And he starts out with, I am the Antichrist. And then what does he got to do next? He doesn't know, but he's looking for a word that rhymes or kind of rhymes with Antichrist. He's just trying to find that rhyming lyric. And that's how he gets to anarchist. So he didn't start out with the idea of anarchist. He started with the idea of Antichrist. And he's just trying to be, it's not a religious thing in his use. It's just being a rebel. He comes from a real impoverished situation, as all those guys did. And he's trying to embrace that as his image. And he's not your kind of typical rocker, good-looking guy, the image of that, Elvis Presley looking cool and that kind of thing. So he's embracing the other way and knowing that people that are more alternative, knowing instinctively, will embrace that too. So that's why they would do, them and other people since would embrace things like the swastika. They're not really Nazis. They're just trying to put the thumb in the eye of society. They're trying to stick it to people. It's a rebelliousness that can come when in youth, especially with boys, but really with anything, with anybody. So ironically, because anarchy is the word that rhymed most closely with Antichrist, and he comes with the idea, I want to be anarchy. So that becomes probably his life theme. But it all started because he needed a word to rhyme with Antichrist, which I think is really, really interesting, because sometimes you start doing something and it leads to somewhere you didn't expect. And they inspired hundreds of punk fans and a whole movement and a whole way of life for decades. And that the idea of anarchy is something that has probably, there's a destructive side to that too. I'm not saying that it's a good thing to embrace anarchy, but used in a certain context. I mean, if you embrace a little bit of rebelliousness on the weekend and then you go to work or go to school the rest of the week, you're not doing any harm. Now, of course, some people probably heard a song like that and dropped out of school and dropped out of college or quit their job and just started breaking windows or something. I don't know. But so it's just, maybe we can relate that to Karen in this imperfect way. They started down a path early on in this, just simply by trying to create a plausible alternative theory for how John could have been killed. And Karen's digging through social media. Unetti's got private investigators out there, and they're just looking for scraps that they can stitch into this narrative. But they didn't anticipate where this was going to go. It's a mistake to think that even as late as when Turtle Boy's first article came out on this on April 18th of 2023, that they all knew that this was going to lead to a movement, right? And if we lose power, I'm sorry, it's icing out right now. It's down to 27 degrees and it's raining hard. So if I cut out, don't panic. It's just, you guys might lose power. You are too. Hope that doesn't happen. We're due for one of those big ice storms. So I can hear that rain coming down hard, which is a bad sign because it's 27 degrees. That means that rain is going to freeze on the tree branches. And once you get to, I think it's a quarter inch, that's when they start to fall. So we'll hang in here as long as we can. I got flashlights ready, but that's not going to help with the internet. So anyways, I think what I've had a conversation with a lawyer today on this too. How did this whole movement get started? Who conceived it? Nobody conceived it. Karen and her team are just exploiting opportunities as they develop. That's it. Roberta got us all by the balls for months. I mean, she just can't develop her own content. And she's not smart enough to give somebody analysis. I don't even think about her. I don't watch her show. I don't care what she says. But she seems to run out of material and go back to embracing going after me. And I guess now lately she's going after Kate all the time. Interestingly, I think that started because a couple months ago, she reached out to Kate to ask Kate if she would go on her show. And Kate just said, no, I'm friends with Kevin, so I don't want to do that. That's it. Kate didn't do anything else. Well, the Roberta, that burned her, I guess. So now she's got to go after Kate. That's how touchy she is. But we don't have to talk about that. Let's just, whatever. She can do what she wants. Whatever it takes to get some content, right, Roberta? Whatever it takes. So if I'm helping you out by giving you a show and you get to go and twist my words, I'm happy to help because you obviously need it. So here you go. We'll try to give you some more content here. All right. So let's get to Turtle Boy's article. And I haven't read this before. Alan Jackson's closing statement was masterful, but see, he's going to criticize it. But I think we can all agree that after listening to the juror last night, that he needs to do it much differently in trial 2. So look, Turtle Boy agrees with me on this, that the defense, as talented as they are, had a bad game plan. Sorry. I am not a member of the Sex Pistols, so I can't do heroin to stay awake. I have to drink caffeine. All right. So, Turtle Boy says, after listening to the juror last night that he needs to do it much differently in trial 2, I'll go back and listen again, but the words reasonable doubt should have been pounded into the heads of the jurors over and over again. They just needed to have it explained to them what reasonable doubt was, and then outline the mountain of reasonable defense showing that Karen Reed might not have hit John O'Keefe with a car. It's the only bar they had to overcome. So, of course, I mean, the state does not have to prove beyond all doubt. It has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And the example that I try to use, though, all right, so if you have excellent witnesses like the ARCA guys, PhDs, intelligent, articulate guys, get up there and say that they think it was very unlikely that John O'Keefe's injuries were caused by a vehicle. If you don't have anything else out there, that's doubt, right? Even if you're not sure if the ARCA guys are right, but there seems to be enough just looking at that there's reasonable doubt. This is the argument that I had with brother counsel. However, the mistake that they're making, the mistake that brother counsel is making, and apparently Turtle Boy, is that you have to look at all of the evidence. So if there was video of Karen striking John with her Lexus, the ARCA guys would still have their argument. They would have said the same thing. So, but you would look at the evidence in the video and say, okay, the ARCA guys were wrong for whatever reason, because we've got this powerful evidence in this video. You can't refute it. Well, that's what happened here. We didn't have a video, but we had something that was equally powerful. We had the GPS that showed John that didn't go in the house, and that's bulletproof. But most importantly, we had that correlation between the vehicle data and John's phone, the Waze, the GPS, and then finally with the motion data that showed what time it last moved. It's unassailable. It's unassailable. You cannot, there's no way any combination of troopers or experts or McAlberts could have manufactured that. I know Jen McCabe is the most evil genius of our time. I understand that. She probably talked Putin into launching his attack on Ukraine. Putin did that for Jen, right? She's dastardly. But even as dastardly as she is, she could not have manufactured that vehicle data in a way that correlated so perfectly with the data on John's phone. Nobody could have. The CIA could not have done that. And that's as bulletproof as video. It just requires you to take a slight mental step to process it. Obviously, video is easy. You just look at it. That's why the old maximum picture is worth 1,000 words. I mean, you just look at it. You don't have to think. If there was video of this accident, you wouldn't have to think. This data is just as bulletproof as a video would be. It just requires you to do a little bit of thinking. Not a lot. Not a lot. Now, why didn't... So let's just talk just briefly before I get back to Turtle's post. Let me just talk generally about my reaction to last night's... Let's put my fan on a little bit, getting a little warm in here. Let me just talk generally about the interview. I thought the juror seems like a nice kid, and I think he seemed like an intelligent kid. Now, some people will probably quibble with me on that, but I think it's maybe not totally fair to him, because we look at this as people, whatever side of the aisle you are on in this case, but that have followed this very closely, so we know all the evidence. But that juror, if he was being honest, and I believe he was, didn't have any of that. He just had what was presented to him over 10 weeks in trial. And they weren't allowed to use transcripts. So they had that, they had notes, and they had some of the evidence that was entered in as an exhibit that they could bring into the deliberation room. That's hard. There's an enormous amount of information. Just even think about all the witnesses that testified here. There's a lot of information to master in this case. You cannot master this. I think even if you had to have a college course, Karen Reed 101, it would take more than a semester to master all this information, whatever side of the aisle that you're on. So I think the juror did, and he's obviously picking up, as part of the process, the 12 of them shared that information, stuff that they remembered from the case. But I think he was an intelligent guy, and I have every reason to believe that he did his duty diligently. Now, as I posted on Twitter, got some questions. But please, I don't mean this at all to be an attack on this gentleman, because, like I said, he did his job to the best as he could. He made a sacrifice to do it, and he should be commended for that. There's no reason to not commend him for that. But here's the questions that I have. He claims that he started out as a not guilty vote on charges 1 and 3, and also not guilty on manslaughter. And this is the key. When we talk about the case, we're primarily talking about manslaughter. We don't go into intent too much. And that's the thing, is you have to first prove that Karen in the Lexus struck John before you can even get into leaving the scene of the accident and intent. There's almost really no point spending a lot of time on those, and that's what the jury did. Now, he claims he started out, and I'm sure he's telling the truth, as a not guilty vote on manslaughter. Then during the process of deliberation, he actually switched to guilty. He further claimed that since the trial ended, he has not followed the case in the media and social media. Maybe we'll see that clip, I hope, and we'll see exactly how he framed it. But he definitely wanted to give us the impression that he has not followed the case at all since then. So he didn't go back, and if he's telling the truth about that, he's not watching Turtle Boy. He's not watching Melanie Little. He's not watching Yellow Cottage Tales. He's going on with his life. Understandable. But strangely, his position has dramatically changed. Now, Be one thing if he just went back from guilty, so he ended up on guilty. Be one thing if he had, he was already teetering. So if he flipped back into not guilty based on reasonable doubt, that wouldn't be that mysterious. Just had time to process and rethink some of what he went through. But he did more than that. There's a big difference between not guilty based on reasonable doubt and she didn't do it. And he told Turtle Boy last night that she didn't do it, that she was factually innocent. How did he get there? How did he go? He's starting out, picture a clock, right? He's starting out at 25 past noon. He's ending up at 10 minutes to 1 by the end of the deliberation. But then now, despite not falling in the meteor, he's gone all the way back to noon. He's gone back further from where he began. I'm just curious as to how that happened. Again, I'm not accusing him of anything. I'm really not. He does seem like a good kid, a smart kid. He's an EMT. But that's a little bit of a problem for me. And one of the things that we've seen, this is not new to the Karen Reed case, but for us, it's new to us following this phenomena. Not for everybody, but for a certain percentage of people, the glare of the headlights, the glare of the spotlight draws you like moths to a flame. And this has been true in every high-profile case. It happened hugely in the Lizzie Borden case, which I looked a lot into. I'm sure Jack the Ripper, anything. I mean, people get drawn, not everybody, but a certain percentage of people get drawn into that. And once you start getting sucked in, so he's obviously been communicating with Turtle Boy for some time. Why Turtle Boy? I mean, he was in court to watch Turtle Boy thrown out. Now, I don't remember if they dismissed them. They might have dismissed them for some of that, but certainly he was aware of what was going on. He said he didn't know who Turtle Boy was beforehand, but yet then the only really strange thing I think he said last night, he said he didn't know who hired the ARCA guys. He thought maybe an insurance company, which that was reasonable, but then he said he thought maybe Turtle Boy had hired him. I don't get that at all. That was the only really odd thing he said. But if he's unaware of Turtle Boy, why would he think that Turtle Boy hired the ARCA guys and then was in court to cover it? I don't get it. And why does he have no sense at all of what's going on with Turtle Boy? How Turtle Boy is made pretty clear that he's going to go after any juror that doesn't vote his way. Is he not aware of that? When you're on a jury, even for a regular small case, so I think the last time I was on one, it was 6 or 7 days, so much shorter than this. But you're locked in that room with those people all week, and you form a bond with everyone in that room. You really do. You're not allowed to talk about the case, so you talk about, although he also implied they talked about the case a little bit. I don't think they're supposed to, but you talk about your personal lives, and you eat with these people, you have your coffee with them, and you do form a bond. And that bond exists even when you start deliberating and you have different ideas about what it can, and things can still even get heated when you have different ideas. I've experienced that, but despite having different ideas, you still feel that bond to those people that you may disagree with because you just spent all this time in this very unique experience locked in a room with them. So I would think that this juror would feel really tight with all those other jurors, even the ones that he maybe disagreed with. So how does he feel about now he's closely aligning over time? Because he first communicated with Turtle Boy, months ago? He did a very good interview with him that Turtle Boy printed. Now he's coming out and doing 3-hour shows with him. How does he feel aligning with a guy who is basically threatening the other jurors, including the jury foreman? Now, before anybody, Turtle Boy out there, or anybody wants to say, you did that with the dismissed juror, no, I did not. I did not. I've never identified her, and the only message I sent her said, I will never identify you. And she was not an actual juror. She was dismissed. And her behavior was inappropriate enough to threaten the entire justice system, even Turtle Boy, though he will never say that to her because she's a turtle rider and she's in touch with him. But if you catch him alone, I'm sure he's plenty smart enough to understand that the idea of a juror lying to get onto a jury is a problem and threatens the justice system. The idea of a juror raising her hand every morning to lie under oath and say that she didn't follow this in the media, that's a problem with the justice system. Forget about how she feels about Karen or not, or how she feels about Turtle or not. That's a problem, right? But I'm never going to reveal anything other than what I have. And I'm only revealing this not because I have a problem with the way she voted, but because of that. She she threatened the entire jury process because of her behavior. And, going out drinking at night on wild benders. Is she actually showing listen, let's be honest, it was hard for all of us to kind of stay awake through parts of that trial, most of it. How do you do it if you have a hangover? And you've been up until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. So no, what she did was very irresponsible and very disrespectful to the other jurors and to justice and to the family and to Karen to do that. So no, that's it. I would never criticize. Turtle Boy's done interviews with other jurors that were free Karen Reed. I don't attack them. I say they did their job. As long as they were honest on the jury questionnaire, were honest at the voir dire, and then were honest every day when they took the oath in the morning. Sorry, wrong hand. When they took the oath in the morning. And they sat and listened to the evidence and did their best. That's all you can ask. They've made a huge sacrifice. Even if, we might not agree with their conclusions. Well, of course, but that doesn't, they wouldn't agree with mine either. So if I was on that jury. But there's something sacred about making that sacrifice and going on and doing the best you can. And nobody's, so people should respect their privacy and not attack them. So I'm not attacking Ronnie at all. I'm just asking questions. Why is he forming this close? Why are all these dismissed? Why are all these not dismissed? Why are so many of these jurors that obviously voted not guilty in some way reaching out to Turtle Boy? It's not personal when I attack Turtle Boy. It's what he does. I mean, like I said, it was kind of a shame because what I see in the interview last night is a lot of talent. There's just no integrity. Much of what he was saying to those jurors, or not, a lot of what he would say to those jurors was debunked in trial. Maybe some of that will come up in the clips. So you're putting out things that are falsehoods. That's irresponsible. Why would you even, if you're going to be respectful to the juror, why keep using the word McAlberts? Just why wear a Bukkake shirt? But other than that, he did a good job, and he asked plenty of good questions, and brought out a lot of useful information. As I've been clear, I not only think the defense made mistakes, I think the prosecution really boggled this case badly. And it was at the strategic level. Yes, Adam Lally is also an intelligent, talented guy. I'm sure he's way smarter than me. I'm not trying to, very hardworking, unimpeachable integrity. That's everybody seems to say that about Adam Lally, even people that aren't necessarily his biggest fans. But the big mistakes were strategic. They weren't because he didn't have time. He only interviewed the most important witness, Trooper Paul, once. He only spent one day with Trooper, and I think he only spent one day with Trooper Proctor too. But it really was Trooper Paul that was the key witness because he's the one that has to give the state's explanation to what happened to John. And working with him would have made a big difference. You're taking a guy that has to testify in a huge case, in a huge spotlight. Is he going to hold up? Most people that don't have that kind of experience in front of a mic, in front of a camera, are not going to. And Trooper Paul didn't. And he would have held up much better if he was prepared better. And if you prepared him better and earlier, you might have seen that he didn't have a full grasp of a couple parts of that thing. And he didn't, obviously the key cycle stuff. And in addition to that, and I think the reason for that, he understands fully well what a key cycle is. He's trained on black box EVD data. EDR, rather. Sorry. Event data recorder. Yeah. EDR data. But the Lexus text stream was seemingly new to him. Now, it's similar to EDR, but he needed some help working with that. And maybe if he was prepared better, they could have got that help and figured that stuff out before he got in the stand. His explanation for what exactly happened to John is probably pretty close to what happened, but it left too much room for doubt for the jury. It wasn't practiced. It wasn't set up enough. But the most important thing, as I've said many times, Trooper Paul did not have the data and the reports compiled by Trooper Garino. And Trooper Garino did not have the data and reports compiled by Trooper Paul. And it's the correlation between those two that is the most important, by far the most important thing in this case, because it's bulletproof. But there was no single witness to present that. So it wasn't presented to the jury at all until a little bit in the closing arguments. That's too late. That has to, those jurors, before the first defense witness takes the stand, if you're going to win, you have to have pretty much blown away those jurors by that time. And then if you have a good defense team, they'll move the needle back a little bit. But it's too late to do it in closing arguments. It's too late. And wasn't done that effectively in closing argument anyways. There was too much focus on I hit him, which I've said all along. I've said it for a year. That's not going to convince a jury, and it didn't. And you can hear Ronnie talking about that last night, but you've heard the other jurors talk about it. It wasn't a factor for them. You heard it in the Phelps interview too. It wasn't a factor. So bad strategy, bad game plan. Both sides. Someone had, and that's why no one won, maybe. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but tough to get a win when you have a bad game plan. All right, sorry about the long segue. Not segue, but pause. Let me go back to the article. Jackson, I'm reading from Turtle Boy's Twitter post today. Jackson's speech was poetic and would have been historical had they acquitted on all three accounts. He ended up by telling them, and so now he's going to quote from the closing arguments of Alan Jackson. You have the most powerful tool known to the American jurisprudence because you have your vote. What will you do with this moment? Ignore the lies, the manipulation, the misogyny, the bias, and the lack of evidence? Could you ever do that? Would you ever do that? Or will you say with your verdict, I see the truth and I will not ever look the other way? When you stare the truth down, you'll see that the Commonwealth has not proven this case beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. Not even close. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen Reed is innocent. Do justice and find her not guilty. It's fine, but it's standard. I mean, I'm sure we'll find similar closing arguments. That's Alan Jackson's. Well, anybody can write those closing arguments. Alan Jackson's talent is more in the cross-examination, his ability to react and stuff. All right, so let's see Turtle Boy's continue with his criticism. Although all of this was true, it was just too much. He's not Denzel Washington giving a speech to the Titans after the Gary Bertier got paralyzed before the state championship. I agree. That they didn't need a speech like that. They just needed to have it drilled in their head that we don't convict people in this country for crimes if we're not sure beyond a reasonable doubt that they are guilty. I agree 100% with that. I agree with Total Boy 100% that there's no point in trying to inspire the jury. That's unlikely to work. And there's no indication that that kind of stuff had any effect on any of them or probably on any trial. Some of the stuff that Alan Jackson was doing was performative because there's a lot of people watching. So we have to remember that too. So and I agree generally that what you have to do, if you can make it so that the jurors are not sure, then that's reasonable doubt. All right. Or so if you're, again, you don't have to be 100% sure, but to the degree that you can create doubt. All right. Jennifer McCabe's Google search, the butt dials, destroyed phones, Proctor's text message. All of this is reasonable doubt for Karen Reed. This is this is where Turtle goes. Turtle goes astray. He's bought into this party line. At this point, nobody of right mind that has looked at this closely believes that Jen McCabe's Google search and that she made that search at 227. Nobody does. It's so easily debunked, and I've debunked it so often on this channel. I'm not going to do it for you here. You can go through plenty of old shows to see it, and it's debunked by logic. You don't have to be a tech expert. You can start just by knowing that the senior forensic data analyst for Celebrate, and that's the program that both sides use and the police use. He said that those text messages, that search didn't happen at 227. Another elite expert said that. And then there's other logical reasons that we've gone into, such as Karen asking a paramedic on the ambulance. Basically the same question she had asked Karen. How long would it take someone to die in the cold? All right. The butt dials don't mean shit. Destroyed phones. Again, this kind of bothered me a little bit last night because it was debunked. But I hope Brennan paid attention to that interview. The idea that Brian Higgins went to a military base to destroy his phone. All right. We have a responsibility in the public, if we're going to comment on these cases, to understand the explanation. That explanation came out in court. Now, maybe it has to come out more effectively. I've given it many times on this channel. Brian Higgins lives on the Cape. The towns on the Cape do not have trash pickup. They don't have public trash pickup. So you either have to pay for a private trash pickup, or you have to take your own trash to a facility managed by each town. Brian Higgins is a combat vet. He was in the Guard in the 90s, didn't serve combat then. But then even though he was a lieutenant on the Cambridge Fire Department, fourth generation of his family, the Iraq War was heating up, getting into that point where George Bush was going to put in the surge. A lot of Americans were dying. Now, he's a lieutenant, so it was going to give him no career benefit, but he decided he wanted to be there to do his patriotic duty. And so he got back, signed back up for the Guard, and went back and did dangerous work protecting transport convoys in Iraq. So being a former veteran, he's entitled, as all veterans are, to certain perks. And one of the perks that they use is they go to the base. Now, I don't know what Brian Higgins does at the base, but I know other people who've served in the military go to these bases to buy discounted gas, discounted stuff at the general store. Now, when they say Brian Higgins destroyed his phone at a military base, what it really is, he threw his trash out there on the way to the mainland. mundane explanation. Turtle Boy doesn't want to give you the mundane explanation. Now, Ronnie, the juror, didn't seem to understand that either, but I'm not knocking him for that because he had to master 10 weeks of information. So I'm not surprised. And though it was brought out by Higgins on the stand, like many things, it wasn't brought out as clearly because of the questioning as it should have been. But Brian Higgins just threw his trash out on the base. Now, I don't know. We could check. Maybe there's a way to check, but I'm assuming that Brian Higgins does not have a private trash pickup at his house. That'd be a good question. We should try to find that out. But if he did, that's what they would have picked up the trash there. But Brian owned other houses. He lived other places on the mainland. And so he doesn't have any kids. At the time, didn't have a wife or a girlfriend, I don't think. Well, we know he didn't have a girlfriend because of the Karen thing with the texting and stuff. So I don't think he was generating a lot of trash. So he probably just took a little bag of trash and tossed it on the base into the garbage can. Now, more or less, that's what came out in the trial. That's you get the idea. We get the impression from the Turtle people and the defense that Brian Higgins went out of his way to go to a military base and then went into the woods and took out a sledgehammer and destroyed his phone and then buried it 6 feet under. It's crazy. It's crazy. And this is how it is with 95% at least of the things, of the many, many things that this defense team and this deranged crowd brings up. They all have mundane explanations like that. Most of them. And the 5% that would include, for instance, the butt dials. But again, you have to look at the total evidence. I did 2 butt dials yesterday. Again, I call it a butt dial. That's what people see. When you had a cell phone back in the 90s and the early 2000s, unless you had a flip phone. At one point, I did have a flip phone. In fact, the reason you want a flip phone is so you don't do butt dials. Because in those phones that they had back then, if it wasn't a flip phone, most of us, especially guys, put it in our back pocket. I don't know why, but we did. And you sit on it, and if the screen is open, it might call someone on your most recent calls. Pretty common thing. And literally a butt dial. I know someone in Worcester that did that. Butt dialed his wife while he was in his car with another woman. And she went out looking for him when she got the butt dial. He didn't know that he butt dialed her. She found him. They did not live happily ever after. Hopefully they lived happily ever after. The marriage did not proceed. Let's put it that way. That's where butt dials come from. And so people that were adults in that time and owned phones, so people in their late 40s and in their 50s, we call them butt dials still, but it all really means, I've used the term butt dial probably hundreds of times over the last 10 years. I make them all the time, but they're not really from my butt. It's just an accidental call. It's usually in my hand, and I open up the screen and I accidentally hit a most recent call. But I always say, butt dial, sorry. Now, forever forth, they're going to be known as the Canton butt dial or maybe the Canton dial. I don't know. But that's, but is there anything really suspicious with that? The butt dial from Brian Albert to Brian Higgins lasted a duration of 1 second. It went to voicemail. We learned that during the trial. Again, Turtle Boy doesn't want to recognize that was made clear in the trial, that calls that go to voicemail will show on the part of the caller as having been answered. But on the receiver, they will show as not answered. Now, remember, we never got Brian Higgins' phone. The only reason we know about this is from the feds and the crazy shit that they did. Brian Higgins called back Brian Albert quickly after that, and a call that connected for, was it 23 seconds or something? If you want to stack that up, if you want to file that into the. I use an example in the book. I think I maybe talked about this the other day on the show too. But so you know those grocery baskets that you get at the supermarket if you want to carry around. You take the grocery baskets, take 2 of them, and put them on the kitchen table, and you fill in on one all the stuff that's odd, all the stuff that might be suspicious or odd or doesn't have an explanation, and you put it there. And on the other basket, you start piling all the compelling, solid evidence for the prosecution. Now, over time, especially during the trial, as you get explanations for these things, as you start processing the mundane explanations for some of these things, you have to take that out of the basket of odd things. So when you're at the trial, and you may have figured out, once you knew Brian lived on the Cape, Brian Higgins, you might have figured that out on your own. I figured it out during the trial, but before Brian Higgins testified it, because Thomas Fleming, our beloved manager here, has, I won't say where, but family members that live on the Cape. And I go hang out with them there every summer, and it dawned on me, oh, shit, they don't have trash pickup there. He just threw it out. Now, and he's a military guy. So I figured it all out. So other people might have too. But even if you didn't, it was explained in the trial. So once you heard that explanation and thought it through, then you got to take that whole thing about a destroyed phone and take that out of the basket. You got to lighten that load. And there were plenty of other things in there that you have to take out, but not everything. And there's some things. So let's say the butt dials were not explained, but the destruction of the phone on the military base, that's explained. Take it out. So once you've gone through the trial and then you've taken out all the odd things that turned out to be not odd, now you take your baskets, one in each hand, and you stand up. Which one is heavier? That's how you decide what happened. But you got to take out those odd things. Now, at the end of the day, though, there will still be odd things in that basket that are unexplained, such as the butt dials. And how much, and maybe just we're thinking about this metaphorically or whatever, but how much weight do you want to give that? So you keep it there. You don't lose it. There are other things that you find unusual and interesting and could be relevant, and you keep them in there. So, for instance, the fact that Chloe was rehomed. That might mean something. It might mean nothing. We have an explanation for it. The fact that the dog got out and got in a fight with another dog, and when it was being broken up, he bit the other dog's owner, sending her to the hospital. Now, that's the official explanation. But if you don't buy that completely, then you leave that in the basket and you say, okay, there's a maybe explanation, but it's not perfect, so let's leave it here. That's fine. That's good. That's what you do. You leave the things in there that really aren't perfectly explained. But then you've got to look at your other basket and find all the things that are explained. I'm sorry, all the prosecution's evidence. And to the degree that evidence is really heavy, it doesn't really matter what odd things are in the basket, in the odd things basket. Now, for instance, if there happens to be video, if there happened to be a witness that saw a compelling witness, what happened? Well, then you would look at the odd things that are still in that basket and say, all right, they aren't meaningful. So it's a process of weighing in that kind of way. But what goes on in this case here, and this is, again, my problem with brother counsel, is they refuse to look at the things in the prosecution's basket and see if they have any weight. They won't even look at it. They've decided that there are some things in the basket of odd things that are odd enough to them to add up to reasonable doubt without even looking at the other side. That's not a good way to do it. And it doesn't sound like these jurors did it that way. So these jurors, however they voted, seem to have been way more logical than brother counsel. and he's a lawyer. I'm not going to say they're more logical than Aiden Kearney because Aiden's not after the truth. So we don't know. We don't even know what he really thinks. He's trying to just make something from this. Oh, on that subject too, I guess I saw he put a clip of my show the other night where I mentioned how somebody. All right, so when I was going over the thank yous for people that made donations at the end of the show, he somebody had donated some memberships, and actually no, somebody had signed up for 8 months of membership, and I said thank you, and I said, but you don't get anything for it. You're supporting me, but thank you. And I come around in front and said that, and he said he's the ultimate grifter. He's taking that $2 a month and not even telling and not even giving those people anything. That to him means I'm a grifter. But let me just explain how the money worked on YouTube in the process with me. So when I began this channel, and I began actually with another channel right before this, but the idea was that if I could, I'd never even thought of donations or memberships or anything like that. The idea was that if I could get enough traffic on it, it might generate enough in ad revenue. That's from people that watch your channel and see an ad, that it might pay for the channel. And the purpose was to just use the channel then to try to promote some of my fiction work and projects. Now, it didn't work out because so for instance, I think last month from the ad share things, I got 66 cents. So you really have to make, I would say you have to get hundreds of thousands of views for every video. I'd say at least 100,000 views for a video in order to at least make it even a little bit, not lucrative. That's too strong a word, but at least to start pay for some of your expenses. So let's say, I think most of my videos get say 3,000 views. So if I got, let's see, if I got 10 times more than that, that'd be 30. So let's say if I got, 10 times more would be 33,000. So let's say if you got 30 times more. So you'd have to do 30. That would be 30 times 66 cents. So probably be getting about $25 a month. So even though that would be a huge jump in traffic, you need to do way more than that. Again, I wasn't looking to make a lot of money, just hoping to cover the expenses. So, but you had to somehow, I just gave it a shot, Now, the first step is you have to get your channel monetized, and you don't get that until you have X amount of subscribers and X amount of total hours viewed. And then once you're monetized, you set it up, and that's when you have to create these membership categories. It's not an option. You make it up. So I never thought anybody would be buying a membership. So just as I was trying to hurry through the process of setting up setting things up after I got monetized, I put in I think it's $2.99 a month. I forget what it is. Put that in as a membership. I never thought about donations. Never even considered that as a possibility. It just never entered my head. So the support that comes from the channel now is from, I don't know, maybe there's 130 members. Now that's way less than a couple bucks a month because YouTube takes about 40% out of it. And then there's the donations. And that's enough to pay for the expenses of the channel. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And that's it. I'm not looking to do more than that. And when more comes in, I use it to either upgrade equipment or something I try to find to do, even though it doesn't always work out or isn't productive, but something related to helping this case and the victims in this case, the witnesses, trying to do something. It's not always easy to think of things, but it's not like I'm going out and buying blow or something like that, or hookers or whatever. I mean, not or spending money on clothing. You try to find something, but it's not a lot of money that comes in anyway, so it's not. We don't need it. We just have to cover the expenses, but that's it. So for Turtle Boy to call that grifting, I don't know what to tell you. I try to tell the truth. I try to do a lot of research to find the truth, and sometimes it pisses. There's nobody here that follows me, whatever side they're on, that hasn't been mad at something I said, probably already tonight. But that's part of being a truth teller. If you're doing something else, if most of your members agree 100% with the things that you say, then you're probably a grifter because you're not telling the truth. You're just trying to give them what they want, what they think they want. And I won't do that. Now, I actually support a couple of other channels myself on Patreon, and I don't want anything in return from them. They're doing something that I think should be rewarded. So I throw them whatever it is, $4.99 a month or something like that. It's just supporting them. All right. Let's go back to the article. Wow, I wasted an hour on this and didn't get to the clips. I apologize, guys. But like I said, you get to use my voice to go to sleep. All right. So he mentions the Google search, the butt dials, destroyed phones, Proctor's text messages. There's nothing in Proctor's text messages that demonstrate a cover-up or wrongdoing. They're inappropriate. They're insensitive. They may demonstrate some bias against the defendant, but there's nothing that indicates a cover-up. All right. So there's really nothing in Proctor's messages that would add to reasonable doubt other than making the jurors upset. So the McAlberts could have done it, but Karen Reed could not have. So his argument is that there could have been a framing here, but Karen could not have struck John. Now, that just flies in the face of the evidence and the logic, but I understand what he's saying. If you were to accept the ARCA guys and say that John could not have been hit by a vehicle or was highly unlikely, then you would say Karen didn't do it. But there was other evidence besides that, and you can't just ignore that. All right. He says, I believe the defense gave the jurors the impression, which isn't something some people are comfortable doing. In reality, the choice was not binary. It actually wasn't. So the thing is, as I've always said, this was an either or. Either Karen did it or she was framed. There's no middle ground where someone else did it. And there's just no way she could have been framed. I'm not saying that because I don't believe police can be corrupt. They can be. There was no time, there was no opportunity to pry those taillight pieces and bury them in the snow. That's just a timeline. It can't be changed. It is what it is. And you run into many other aspects of that in this case, where it's just the impossibility of a conspiracy is what makes it certain that Karen did it beyond a reasonable doubt. All right. Jackson made it seem in his closing that if the jury voted to acquit her, they were going against the grain. That voting to acquit was a bold, unprecedented move, and that they would go down in history for standing up against injustice. He made it seem like voting to acquit was a bold and brave stance to take, which in my opinion, again, I'm quoting Turtle Boy, which in my opinion would make it harder for a regular person to vote that way. That's an interesting point. I have to think about that. I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. In reality, voting to acquit her was the common sense thing to do since there was so much reasonable doubt. Yeah. I don't think I necessarily agree with that. I mean, because I think that where the value of Jackson's attempt to do that comes in is that you will have people on the jury that might have police in their families, firemen in their families, or whatever, that makes them reluctant to go against the prosecution. And so Jackson's probably trying to inspire them. Listen, you need to be bold there. But I don't think it really matters. So he says Alan Jackson tried to paint a Mona Lisa for jurors in his closing, but all they really needed was stick figures from a second grader to realize they had to vote to acquit Karen Reed. Again, this is only because Turtle Boy utterly misinterprets or is ignorant of so much of the fundamental evidence here. And he just says it in every show from all the false things. And this is, we'll see some of this in the clips probably. And before I get to, all right, let's take this one off. So another thing that I hadn't read. So remember, if you guys remember last week, I read an article from the anonymous Massachusetts lawyer. And apparently there's another one. So I have not read this yet, but the last article was brilliant, so I'm sure this one will be too. This is February 14th from Anonymous Lawyer. All right. Did I share this? All right. Can I make this bigger? That's as big as I can get it, guys. Sorry. That sounded bad. One of the more curious and problematic aspects of the information environment surrounding the Karen Reed case is that so many people have come to trust sources of information who are plainly not acting in good faith. Absolutely. This has been the story of this case. Turtle Boy's not acting in good faith. He regularly tells things to his audience and to that juror last night, things that were debunked and he knows were debunked. To take the most obvious example, I've never seen a case where so many people uncritically accept as truthful everything the defendant's attorneys have to say. Yeah, like how many times do people have to learn? Like we now know there was no such thing as a non-human hair. That was a human hair, and it was DNA matched to John. There was no gap in the library video. The video was motion triggered, as you would expect. And after over and over, they would report things that were false. And this is why, so when people keep saying things like, and the FBI confirmed the 227 search, we do not know that. No FBI expert testified. Nobody from the FBI expert testified. We didn't see a report. All we have is what David Yannetti said, and their history is to twist words. And my guess is that somebody from the FBI ran that extraction from Jen's phone through the same version of Celebrite that Rich Green did, and he got the same result. If you or I ran that version, that extraction to that version, we'd get the same result too. In fact, Ian Whiffen and Jessica Hyde also got the same result using that version. That's not the same as applying understanding to it. So we have no idea if anyone from the FBI, what they looked at, what they concluded, did they do any actual analysis? We don't know. They may have just been testing that software. So, but after you see them say things that are distortive and false all the time, at what point do you wake up and say, all right, we can't trust these guys? All right, he continues. As someone who has been a defense attorney, this boggles my mind. Well, I think as a defense attorney, I don't know. I think it seems like a lot of these is probably, it maybe, I don't know what the ethics of it is, but you might conclude that these defense attorneys are just doing their job too. So I don't know. In the normal world, the world that I thought I lived in before this case started, people generally have negative views of defense attorneys. This is why, and at least understand that their role is to zealously advocate for their client, not to be objective and even-handed sources. Not to be objective and even-handed sources. Let me read that again. It doesn't sound right. I had thought before this case started, people generally have negative views of defense attorneys and at least understand that their role is to zealously advocate for their client, not to be objective and even-handed sources. That's a poorly written sentence, so I'm just gonna move on. And yet there's an entire legion of people out there who have absolutely no bullshit detector whatsoever. Absolutely no bullshit detector whatsoever. It's stunning. When it comes to statements and arguments made by Reed's attorneys, even the most transparent spin jobs are greeted as declarations of truth from on high. It's really bizarre. I've never seen anything like it. It really is. It really is. But this is what happens when people really want to believe something. And that's what happens in any hysteria. People, but maybe it does say something about us as a society that, I don't know, we no longer, too many of us have any sense of skepticism or even any of a realistic understanding of how the world works. So even when I first started covering the case by looking at the Turtle Boy article on April 18th, 2023, his first one, I was intrigued, fascinated by so much in it. But I also had in the back of my mind, even though he didn't say it in the article, it was clear this was a defense theory that had been spoon-fed to him and he was running with it. Doesn't mean it was wrong. But you got to have that sense of skepticism to say, okay, let's try to start absorbing this evidence. Let's see if the prosecution has more to say. Let's try to think this through logically. You got to know that. That's what skepticism does. That's what having some street smarts does. Aaron, he goes on, it would be one thing if Reed's defense team had a long track record of truth-telling that was somehow enough to overcome the default presumption of sleaziness we usually apply to criminal defense attorneys. But that's definitely not the case. Alan Jackson used all of the same tactics in his defense of Harvey Weinstein and Kevin Spacey. I didn't follow those cases, so I don't know. And even in the Reed case itself, the defense team has a well-documented history of gaslighting and goalpost shifting. They've said so many things over the last few years that have proven to be baseless, all of which the Free Karen Reed crowd has chosen to memory hole and never mention again. And this pattern extends to the various online accounts and personalities that cover this case on the FKR side. Many of them, sometimes with little to no transparency to their readers, are just extensions of the defense team. They are. The defense team is putting out shit, and they're just repeating it, and it is what it is. They are literally on the defense payroll. Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about literally. Their objective is not to inform their readers, but to persuade them. And if that requires gaslighting them, so be it. This dynamic is clearly also true of the loudest and most obnoxious voice on the FKR side, Aiden Turtleboy Kearney. There may have been a time very early in this case when Turtleboy was merely expressing his honest opinion about the case. Nope. However, obnoxiously, well, I mean, I'm going to take that back. I mean, I take another sip of my heroin. Roberta, I'm drinking heroin. All right? I'm drinking heroin. So I got to stir it up, Roberta. How do you like your heroin? I got a little cream with mine. If you're feeling low, I'll send you some. But yeah, did Turtleboy, obviously Turtleboy believed to a large degree when he first started reporting this because he cares about a reputation that he's been trying to build for 10 years as a journalist. So he doesn't want to be duped. And I've seen the messages of the original discussions between Turtleboy and Karen through the Pitbull and through Natalie. And he was asking hard questions. So, okay. So anyways, this guy says result. So however obnoxiously and where the things he got wrong were just the result of low journalistic standards and poor analysis, not a conscious effort to mislead his audience, but that time is long past. Yeah. So, I mean, when September 2023, the state came out with a new document that had a lot of really powerful information in it, including the GPS data. And I looked at that and I said, okay, this is over. The GPS shows that John didn't go in the house. And I naively thought, that's it. This is over. And so I read through every word of that long state document that morning. And then about noon, I did a rare daytime show. And in that show, I took a tone of mending fences. I basically said, listen, it's time We've seen this division year. It's over. And it's time to move on and start repairing things, especially in the town of Canton. Because this is it. The GPS showed that John didn't go in the house. As a result of that show, Turtle Boy and Sean in the Gulf both posted similarly, Kevin lies. Kevin lies. But they both said, follow that up right away in the same post by saying, but I haven't read the document yet. So since I had never lied before or since, they had no history of me lying. They had no reason to say I was lying other than it wasn't what they wanted to hear. I mean, how can you determine, like if Turtle Boy made a claim tomorrow about some new piece of information, and I did, especially something that came out in a document, I'm going to come out and say he lies before I read the document? That doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. That's not a truth seeker. All right. At this point, Turtle Boy's reputation, livelihood, and freedom are all very much intertwined with the outcome of this case. If Reed is convicted, that's bad for him in a number of material ways. It's bad for his reputation. It's bad for his business. Just realized, I realized the program that comes with this mic was not open, so I don't know if it sounded. I'm gonna open it now, and let me just do a sound check to make sure. How is my mic sounded so far tonight? Because I forgot to have the program that comes with the mic. I'm looking at chat now, guys. Has the mic sounded okay? Sounds perfect. Thank you, Ashley, and my friend Ashley. And let's make sure it still sounds good as I talk because I opened this program. Still sounds good? Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Jane. All right. Let's get back to the article. All right. At this point, Turtle Boy's all right. It's already read that. In poker terms, Aiden is very much pot committed at this point in the game. Oh, that's a great metaphor. You got your stack of chips and you've decided to keep raising and matching the pot. And now you've invested a huge portion of your chips into the pot. They're in the center of the table. So for you to fold, you're going to lose all that. So you become pot committed and you're reluctant to do that. You're going to see it to the end. And that's the hardest thing in poker too, is if you've already invested a lot of your stash, but now as you've gotten more cards, you realize it's not looking good. And so now your choice is to bluff or fold. Usually the fold is the smarter move, but a lot of times people don't want to do that because of that's maybe the sunk fallacy cost comes in there too. So he's pot committed. He has no choice but to keep bluffing and piling in chips he can't afford for Reed to lose. And as a result, he's willing to gaslight the hell out of his audience. Here's a good recent example. He links to this tweet. Trooper Paul conducted a test in which he backed Karen Reed's Lexus. Trooper Paul conducted a test on July 24th, 2024. So that's just this year. That's after the trial, actually, in which he backed Karen Reed's Lexus into John O'Keefe's Chevy Traverse in an attempt to show that it wouldn't break the taillight. I doubt that test involved any actual contact. He did this in the presence of Paul O'Keefe and that leprechaun they bring with them. And as a result, Karen Reed must now pay for another expert to prove what we all saw on the tape, that she hit the Traverse and her taillight cracks. All right. Yeah. Why does someone say something that's stupid? Stupid. We didn't see a taillight crack. We don't know that. It's almost comical. It's so dumb. Do even turtle riders believe this? That in that ring video, when Karen backs up in the snow into John's Traverse and lightly taps it. Now, you might think that the taillight cracked at that. I don't know. But you certainly didn't see it cracked. Oh my God, is that dumb? Does people read this? I don't even understand it. And it goes, but first they have to file motion to allow their expert to look at the cars and measure the driveway. This is why we donate. All right, so they're looking to raise money so that the defense can do this. All right, well, what can we learn from this? Well, at this point, the defense has, the prosecution has turned over all of their discovery material. So that would include this test and any reports, any conclusions based on it. Ooh, this is I didn't think about this until I was reading this, but so this means, and keep in mind, Turtle gets his information from Karen's camp. So if Karen has to now fund an expert to come in and do their own test, that means, think about the logic, that means that the state has given the prosecution has put a document that shows that the traverse could not have caused that crack. So that's just logic there. I know the Turtle crowd doesn't like it. Now they need to get their own expert to hopefully, for them, find some way to rebut that. Because otherwise, that whole part of the argument is gone. And it was never really rational anyways. No pieces fell into the snow. It clearly wasn't hard enough. I mean, I wouldn't say that it was impossible to crack that taillight, but I mean, it's super unlikely. You can see it was barely nudged. Listen, I lived in Boston. I used to nudge cars like that all the time when I parallel parked, because you have to everybody that lives in Boston has to become a world-class parallel parker, because you've got to be able to move. I could park in a space that had 2 inches in front and 2 inches behind when I was done. I was unbelievable. But the only way to do that is to bump. They even had an expression for it, like the Boston bump and grind or something. I forget. But you knew a certain amount of contact you could do, and it wasn't going to leave a scratch. I was bumping those cars harder based on what it looks like in that video than Karen bumped the Traverse. This is why, for a lot of people that argued that Karen backed into the Traverse on purpose in order to cover up the damage, I was skeptical about that too, because she hit it too softly. All right. Interesting. All right, let's go back to his analysis. This is, again, from the anonymous Massachusetts lawyer. Turtle Boy, hopefully this is Kevin Mahoney. I don't know. Kevin's a good writer. This could be Kevin. Turtle Boy tells his audience that we all saw on tape that she hits the Traverse and her taillight cracks. This is the very definition of gaslighting. He's telling us that we can all see something that literally no one can see. So yeah, he's saying the same thing, and he's picked it out. Thank you, Anonymous, for pointing this post out to us. Of course, we've all seen this ring cam footage, but precisely 0 people have seen Reed's taillight crack in that video, because the video indisputably does not show that. Yeah, why do we have to think of this? How come, of the thousands of people that listen to Turtle Boy, how come none of them can think of this? It's almost like they're in a trance. Go back to talking about the Sex Pistols. When you watch those videos, the crowd in there is like, they're in a trance, man. That's like I've talked about the free Karen Reed face. This is what people like Nurse Kim make when they pose something they think you is a gotcha odd thing, and then you give them the mundane explanation, and somehow they've never heard it before, and their jaw drops, and they're like, and they make, I coined it, the free Karen Reed face, the FKR face. I get that face out of Nick on Court TV. Although sometimes he's pretty good though. He sometimes tries to just smirk when he gets nervous like that. But you get this look like, oh my God, I didn't know that. Holy shit. Yeah, he has a different look. He kind of has this uncomfortable grin. He's like, oh shit, he's got me. But he usually, by the time they come back to him, he comes up with some kind of a response. So So, going on, this is not a debatable proposition. Even if you think this incident could have caused the taillight to crack, it is simply not something that can be seen in the video. Indeed, the video doesn't even show any direct evidence of this. No taillight pieces can be seen falling. So he's saying the same as me. But it's even worse than that. Suppose you took this video out of the context of the case and showed it to 100 people picked at random and asked them to guess whether or not the Lexus taillight was damaged by the impact. How many of those 100 would guess that it was? I can't imagine, he says, it will be more than one or two. Now, I would agree with that, but more to the point, even if it's 10 or 20 people out of 100, even if it's 50 out of 100, which it's not, but even if hypothetically it was 50, you got something that's divided. So for Turtle Boy to make it seem like it's a certainty is just disingenuous. He did enough good work in the interview last night to show us he's not an idiot. So when he's constantly saying idiotic things, it's because he's lying to his audience. Now, let's continue. Now imagine what Turtle Boy's reaction would be if it was the Commonwealth arguing that this barely perceptible collision resulted in a broken taillight. He'd have no less than 52 separate articles and shows devoted solely to mocking the absurdity of this claim. Yep. And we don't just have to rely on our own intuitions on this issue. As Turtle Boy well knows, because he was in the courtroom when it happened, the defense's own witnesses, the expert from ARCA, was specifically asked whether the incident could have resulted in a broken taillight. That's a great, yeah, I forgot about that. And he summarily rejected the idea on oath. So these guys put all their faith in the ARCA guys, and the ARCA guys said, no, that couldn't have done it. But for Turtle Boy, it's indisputable. And he was in the courtroom for that testimony. Maybe he was texting or drawing pictures of the jurors. Who knows? Maybe he wasn't paying attention. But on top of that, the development that prompted this tweet in the first place was a disclosure that the prosecution used Reed's SUV and O'Keefe's Traverse to reenact this collision in the driveway of One Meadows. While the results of that testing haven't been disclosed, it's a safe bet that they will demonstrate that it is physically impossible for this event to have broken Reed's taillight, both because of the positions of Karen's respective bumpers and the negligible speed involved. Turtle Boy absolutely knows this, and he also knows that this evidence will be incredibly damaging to Reed's case. After all, if Reed's taillight wasn't damaged when she backed out of the garage, as the defense claims, the only remaining option is that it was damaged the night before at 34 Fairview. So he's desperate and worried. And his way of dealing with those emotions is to just gaslight the hell out of his audience to hope that he can just will a different reality into existence by saying it confidently and condescendingly enough. It's insulting to his readers, but not surprising. After all, anyone still reading Turtle Boy has demonstrated a high tolerance for gaslighting and bullshit. Yeah, like I said, anyone that really believes Turtle Boy, or at least takes him seriously on this stuff, is just like the people in the audience and at a headbanging rock concert, just going like this. They're not thinking. There's no thought going on in there. All right, so that was a great article. Thank you. All right, so let's go to the clips. All right, let me say thank you first to you guys for the donations, and then we just go to the clips. So Caroline Houghton, good to see you. All right, so we'll have to let me close this. All right. Thank you, Caroline. She says she's got her popcorn ready. Thank you for all you do. You're welcome. And Macy, thank you. She says, I feel like this. Oh, I got to click her comment. I feel like this case is bringing out the worst in me, all the misinformation and drama. Kevin, thank you for being our voice of reason and calm in the storm. And you guys know I try to be the calm, but, sometimes I fail. In those moments, I apologize. And my friend Rena, thank you, Rena. And thank you for sticking up for me on Roberta's show, Rena. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Fleming. Thank you, Joe. Who is Joe? Who was Joe? Was Joe Krowski here? I didn't see him. Let's look at the documents. Joe's got to have his own show, man. Joe is the best. Charlie with a super sticker. Thank you, Charlie. Tulu, haven't seen you in a little while. Thank you very much. Boundless Millennial. He has said the carpet is coming out of storage and being tested. Have you seen or heard this? I have not heard this. So I don't know. I love Boundless Millennials channel. So I don't, is he doing live shows or something? I don't even know. I haven't seen him in a long time, but I don't know. I don't know where he would have heard that too, considering he's not on their side. So, but I mean, I trust him. He's a good source for him. He's honest. So he must have heard something good. My friend Rainey from Florida. He says, I think he said Turtle Boy's name was mentioned in deliberation as a source of the ARCA guys, not necessarily that this particular juror did. That's how I took it anyways. As a source of the ARCA guys, not necessarily. Yeah, I don't know. So are you saying, Rainey, that someone else thought, another juror thought that Turtle Boy paid for that? I don't know. But why? I know they should. I don't know. Why are they talking about Turtle Boy in the jury if they don't know who he is? Because if they do know who he is, they shouldn't be on that jury part probably. Thank you, Rainey. Macy, I signed up for membership to support the work you do. Would never consider you a grifter. Thank you, Macy. And I'm sure, as anybody will attest here, probably all the people that are members will say, yes, Kevin, I disagree with you sometimes. Sometimes really it makes me angry. You piss me off, Kevin. But I appreciate that you're always being honest and trying to tell the truth. So I'm going to bet there's no shortage of people on both sides that get mad at me. All right, Ashley, thank you, my friend Ashley, for $2.99 a month. Kevin gives us the truth and an honest place to discuss the case. That's better than the lies Aiden does. And there's no question he does, but all right. Jill, you deserve every penny. You put countless hours in this case to educate us. Thank you. So, for me, I do it, I guess, because I can. This mob is vicious, and I've talked to so many people, lawyers, all kinds of other people, even people that are on the free Karen Reed side. They cannot publicly state anything because they're afraid of the mob. And I'm in a unique situation where there's nothing the mob can do to me. So I don't really worry about them. But usually people have more to lose than me. And that's why. So that's why they're nervous. So I understand it. Janet Gardner. Thank you, Janet. She said, thank you for all your coverage in this trial. You helped me to understand a lot of it. Hope to see you out in Dedham. I'll be in the blue shirt crowd. Did we meet before? I was there twice after the trial. And I don't usually go, especially because I'm streaming the cases. So, but I don't know. I asked them recently, but they weren't sure yet. Well, they're pretty short. So I asked Court TV if they'll be live in Dedham again. So last year they spent a week there during jury selection, I think. And so right at the start. And the manager for Vinny said, yes, no doubt, but we're not sure which crew will be there. So that means it may not be Vinny that will be there. So after Vinny left, the guy that does kind of the reporting for them, Matt is his name. I don't know his last name. Seems like a really good guy. I met him there. He covered the case in Dedham for that whole 10 weeks. So maybe they'll just have him there. I don't know. Okay, thank you guys. Let's go to the clips. Now, again, I haven't seen these clips, and they've been sent to. Oh, well, I got a lot of emails. All right, let's see. What was the main one I was going to go to? A lot of people have sent me these clips, so thank you guys. I appreciate it. Hold on one second. Was it on Facebook? People have sent me clips both on Facebook and by email, so we should be able to get to them all, I think, because they're all short clips, as far as I can tell. How you guys doing tonight? I'm looking at the Facebook. All right. I'm not going to say the names of the people that sent me these, but you know who you are. So thank you. I'll try to do this while nobody can see your names. I don't guarantee that I won't make a mistake on that. But let's do the best we can. Because sometimes some little piece of information is in the all right. Turn the volume up. All right, good. I don't see any identifiers. Oh, I want to just address. Well, let's let me hold off. Let me just do the clip first, and because maybe this will come up in one of these clips. All right, here we go.
From Joan for $25 and says, knowing what you know now, what is your opinion regarding this case? And if you think he was hurt inside the house?
I think he wasn't injured by Karen and her vehicle.
Okay.
Where he was injured and who injured him, I don't know. And I think that's what law enforcement should be looking right at, is trying to figure out. Unfortunately, it's been such a long time ago, but that's what we should, that's the mystery, right?
If you invited
But it
someone
doesn't
to-
seem consistent.
This is from Joan for $25 and says, knowing what you know now.
All right. So not going to belabor this one. Thank you for the clip. I think at some point, if I remember right, Turtle Boy pointed out to this juror that if John was not struck by the vehicle, then the police need to be investigating. Obviously, that would make it unsolved, but I mean, they need to be investigating who the perpetrators were. I mean, the thing is it could not have been another vehicle. Karen's Lexus pieces were found there. So if you're going to make the argument that it wasn't Karen, then it has to involve a framing. And what incentive would someone else have to enlist all these people to do that? All right. Let me remove this and go to another one. Oh, I got to turn. Sorry, hold on. I guess you hit the volume each time. Come on.
Had to believe the McAlberts were honest, or you didn't. And did the Google search come up? Because this Google search was what ultimately got me hooked on this case. That 227 Google search that came back as deleted. And then the deleted phone calls from Jennifer McCabe to her sister at 6:07 and 6:08. And Brian Albert not coming out of the house, etc. Did you guys discuss the behavior of the McAlberts and how suspicious it was?
We extensively discussed why was the first person to go to the house, approach the house, was member of the family, you know what I mean? And then the other pieces of the Google search, we don't know. And again, there was not an expert in the group necessarily that could talk about it with enough knowledge on experience, and that if those Google searches can track to the exact timeline and time frame and backtrack. So right, we're not really sure about that, but we looked at it and said it's again maybe just distractors.
That's the consensus was, that the 227 Google search was a distraction.
Again, kind of distractor. I think some people were set at the very beginning that based on the evidence that they had seen so far, and kind of combing through some of the evidence, they kind of looked at it and said, you know what, both individuals were there at that particular address. One person was operating the vehicle under the influence, and another person is now deceased.
Wow. All right. Next question. Either had to believe The
Okay.
McAlberts were
All right. So good. It came up right there. That was one of the things I wanted to talk about. He frequently used this word distractor. And what did he mean by that? Well, what do you mean? That's a word. I think what he meant by it is the defense team these guys had, excuse me, a healthy sense of common sense that pretty much every free care and read person lacks. And that is that a defense team's job is to muddy the waters. And so that includes they're going to find experts that'll do that. And he called them distractors. But they had this common sense understanding that probably in every case, a well-resourced enough defense team is going to find experts to say something that will muddy the waters. And they dismiss that. Now, I want, if you guys will forgive me, I'm going to pat myself on the back because this is how I'm not an expert on juries, but I don't know if anybody is because the lawyers I've talked to, they don't get to interact with the juries. My description that I have said consistently on this channel is that when you have a process, if you don't need to have a jury, you can just have 10 people and put them in a room and ask them to solve a puzzle like this. And what they're going to do is you've been presented with a whole bunch of evidence. It's almost, in this case, a whole lot, right? 10 weeks, bunch of witnesses, bunch of evidence. How do you even start, right? Well, the one thing you're going to look for things that everybody agrees on, all 12 of you, and build. So everybody agrees that everybody agrees that John is dead, right? All right. Everybody agrees that John died or was found near death on the lawn. Everybody agrees that John had drank a lot and that Karen had drank a lot that night. So some of these things are so obvious, they're not laying them out. But you get making a point is that when they get into the room, they're going to put out the things that they agree on and see what kind of case they have from there. The things that they don't, that not all 12 jurors agree on, or that you really can't be certain about, Turtle Boy is making the mistake here of thinking that leads to reasonable doubt. That's not the way the jury is going to approach it. I tried to explain this to Kevin Mahoney months ago. And again, it was my theory, but I believe it's being borne out. It's just because it's a logical way that a group, when people try to think about it, see, I think when everybody, including lawyers, try to guess at how a jury is going to think, what they're doing is you're trying to put yourselves into the minds of an individual juror and see how they'll view the evidence that was presented to them. But there's a problem with that. That's not really how it works. Because what is a group dynamic here, and what you have to do is just look not what each person thinks as they start deliberating, but what other things that 12 of them agree on. Now, things like destroyed phone in the military base, things like 227, things that are argued about in court that can't really be proven. And that includes things like I hit him. Those things are put to the side. I said this all along. I hit him isn't going to work. And I actually made this argument, I think it was about March last year, that I realized that I did a video on this. I said 227 is not going to be a factor. I said that. And it was thinking about this that it dawned on me that that's the way it's going to be. It's not like defense lawyers think. They think that if you have something that people are divided about like that, a piece of evidence, that is going to be reasonable doubt. No. If they're divided or the evidence is unclear, they're just going to put it aside and move on to the evidence that's clear. And so I think that's what's happened here. Sorry, let me pull up the next clip. All right. This is really interesting because, again, this is the way I think a jury will think about this. And it's not the way probably a lot of people understand. And it's not probably the way most defense lawyers think a jury is going to operate. So it's, if you could read that and think, I mean, you could listen to that and think that they just didn't like Dr. Russell because he considered Dr. Russell and apparently Dr. Sheridan and Rich Green to just be distractors, as he calls them. Somebody just texted me to say there's no sound. Is that true? The video didn't play. All right, that's weird. It was. Let me try it again.
What they were arguing, but their entire defense is third-party culprit.
Can you guys hear that?
So are you saying that
still no video?
Not the most effective defense for if you were coaching their lawyers for the second trial, like would you say that isn't that as effective as you guys think it is?
I don't think it's as effective. I think it would have been better to focus on the evidence that the state is trying to promote and focus on those and show the holes on those or create the reasonable doubt based on those pieces of information. So, for example, have an expert other than the individuals that were there who could actually talk knowledgeably about the physics of damage to a vehicle. I understand the ARCA group, but somebody else potentially or clear indication that this is not a distractor. I think having those individuals testify at the end after all the other distractors, which was the expert on animal bites, and then also the little pieces of distraction there that was created might have not helped the last person.
But the last two to go were the ARCA guys.
I think if the ARCA guys had gone before the distractors, I think it would have been better because then it would have been more solid that, the physics is not there to promote the damage to the vehicle, and then introduce other explanations that may have caused the injuries and caused his demise.
Okay.
All right. I thought that's a great clip. Thank you for who sent that. And I think that is extremely insightful. And let me explain what this means. All right. You could take what I think would be the wrong conclusion about what Ronnie is saying if you think that what he's saying is that Dr. Sheridan, Dr. Russell, and Rich Green were distractors because they weren't good, whereas the ARCA guys should have gone first because they were good. That's not what he's saying, I don't think. What he's saying gives us a real insight into how jurors work, okay? You start with the I love it because this guy thinks like me. Now, he came up with very different conclusions, whatever, but he thinks like me. You start at the fundamental evidence, at the core, and work your way out. So what he wanted to see here was, at the core, was John struck by a vehicle? And so he's saying here, if you first establish that John was likely not struck by a vehicle. Now, let's say they had sent the ARCA guys first. I think what he's saying is it's not that they would have looked at that and said, okay, that's it. That's reasonable doubt. Let's go home. I think what he's saying is that you build your argument from the core out. And the core thing is first to determine, was John struck by a vehicle? And he saw that as core. And then if he wasn't struck by, if it's not clear that he was struck by a vehicle, then He wants to see other theories about what could have happened, and that's why he looks. Then you would start looking at things like the wounds on the arm. I think this is what he's saying here, and I think it's very important because this is the way a logical jury is going to think. And so there are some ways that the presentation could be helped. So, for example, and I hopefully this will be in one of the clips, but I remember him talking about the timeline of planting evidence. They had asked for if there was a report from the CERT team. There wasn't, but it's because they were looking at the timeline. Look, this is exactly how I approached this case, right? So for the summer of 2023, I was trying to figure out, could evidence have been planted? Where was the Lexus? Was it under surveillance? Who had access to it? What other times that somebody could have pried pieces off, taillight off, and then where was the opportunity to get it buried in the snow? Well, that timeline was crucial. Now, if anybody has access to Hank Brennan, I'm not saying he's not already do this. He's very thorough. He probably is. But please, 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 please consider this. Make a graphic that explains. Man, I made one before too, and but they can't use mine, so they have to get their own. Not that I wouldn't give it to them, but make a graphic that it shows the timeline of the possibility of planting evidence. So you want to show where that Lexus was all day and what time the CERT team found the pieces. Because you don't want them, they're not allowed to take a transcript. They're allowed to take notes, but in a long trial, they don't know if they haven't followed the case, they don't know what to write down in notes. I took notes as I was watching the case, but I knew what I was looking for, things that, I wanted to see that were relevant, but it's hard to do that if you're just starting from scratch. So when they get to the jury room, they're not going to remember exactly where the Lexus was all day and whether someone could have had access to it. Give them that graphic display. At least give it to them in the closing arguments. And I guess that's probably the only way you would be able to give it to them. But give it to them then, and then so that they can take it with them into the deliberation room and point to it as they're having that discussion. Well, could somebody have planted evidence? And you look at the Lexus and you say, well, it was in the garage until 5:08. Then Karen had it on the road. Then it was back parked in the driveway, but under surveillance video of the ring. At some point, I forgot his name. The guy that John was drinking with that night, his daughter's a friend of Kaylee's. And Camerano came and picked up Haley so she wouldn't be alone. I think that was around 6:30, maybe 7. And so he spent about 20 minutes at the house, shoveling to try to get the garage door to work. And so it would have been no time for anybody to come in there then and pry taillight pieces. Then there was the police car that showed up to do a wellness check at 8:22. And then John's family got home. I'm not sure the exact time, but say around 10:30, maybe 11. And then after that, shortly after that, Karen arrived with her family and they took the car back to Dighton. So it's on the road during a blizzard going to Dighton. And then in Dighton, it sits buried in snow in the driveway and also under surveillance video, which is in discovery. So, and then it's towed back to the Sallyport and it doesn't arrive it arrives at the Sallyport too late for anybody to tinker with evidence there and get it at the crime scene. So when you show the jury that, they're going to say there was no time to plant evidence. There was no opportunity. I want you to do that, but don't make them try to figure it out from memory. Give them a graphic display of it that when they're in the jury room, they can point to it. Please, Hank Brennan, do that if you haven't already. You probably already have. Rainey, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rainey. So let's get to another clip. Oh, hold on a second. Hold on one second. All right.
Or full of them, or you give them, you donate them to, like, I think there's like a bin somewhere that you can give it back to, right? Just
Yeah.
donate. But
Yeah. So, but was that discussed at all? Like I personally, if I was in that jury room, I'd be like, bro, they destroyed their SIM cards. They're throwing phones at military bases. These people are shady as fuck. I can't believe a word they're saying. Did that come up at all?
I believe we again talked about it, but we're like, is this a distractor? They're just trying to let make people think that there's something else going on when there really isn't. So
Yeah. Next up we have Tom.
All right. So you've got to eliminate as many of these odd things or distractors, if he wants to call them that. And that was pretty efficiently eliminated, but just obviously not in a way that was clear to the jury. So this is another problem with the prosecution. You have to make sure each of these things is made clear to a jury. That is not a strength of Adam Lalley's. I suspect it will be a strength of Brennan. And again, I'm not attacking Adam Lalley. I hope if they get a win here, he feels a full measure of success out of it, but didn't always make things clear. And for instance, what is stored on a SIM card now? Shit. Just your contacts. There's no significant information stored on your SIM card. It doesn't have the text messages. It doesn't have your call history. It doesn't have anything useful in terms of you'd want to hide it. It has your contacts and some basic metadata stuff in there. That's it. It doesn't have anything relevant. But that was not made clear to the public, to the jury. People to this day don't understand it. God damn it, Lally. Make this stuff clear to a jury so they don't waste time on it. All right. Here we go. Next clip. Again, thank you guys for sending these.
Favorite witness is Jennifer McCabe to talk about. I mean, we've talked about the Google search, but what did people think of her when was she convincing to these people? Was she villain or was she loving friend?
I think it wasn't very clear. It was more of an indifferent. Like, she wasn't helpful for the necessarily for the prosecution, but also not necessarily helpful for the defense. She was this neutral kind of individual that provided some testimony, but most of, at least for myself, I would not consider her testimony as anything worth looking at or reviewing.
Wow. Favorite witness.
What did Turtle Boy whisper there? Let me just
provided some testimony, but at least for myself, I would not consider her testimony as anything worth.
All right. I think he said wild, actually. I don't think at first I thought he said liar, but I think he said wild. But again, this is great, giving insights to both the defense and the prosecution about how actual juries look, how they operate. And this is very much what I've been saying, right? So, see, this guy, Peter, I forget his last name, seems like a nice guy, but a lot of times he's been on court TV. He's a defense lawyer. It always takes the Karen Reed side, but he says things that I don't agree with. So he says a tie goes to the runner. So Ty goes to the defense. And what he means by that is that if there's a piece of evidence like 227 and the jury is split because I'm not the jury is split, the evidence is split because you have experts on two different sides and they both present reasonable arguments and you can't decide. And so what he would say is Ty goes to the defense, and that means that has to be reasonable doubt. That's wrong. He said that on the show one time, and unfortunately, I didn't get to go again. And I'll tell you why that's wrong, Peter, who's written a book. The Ty goes to the defense only in this situation if the prosecution lays out a fundamental key piece of evidence for their charge, and that is a tie. If that's a tie, that goes to the defense. Yes. But only if it's a prosecution piece of evidence and a key piece of evidence for the charge. An example, let's see, is there an example in the Karen Reed case? I think most of the examples for that might go around the issue of intent. If intent is, we look at the various levels of intent, and I'm going to leave aside the reckless endangerment clause of second degree because not only is it as a practical matter difficult to get a jury to go on that, but also I talked to a retired judge and she said, no, even in the case law, that's not usually, even though it's in the statute, it's not usually by itself enough of a level of malicious intent to get a second degree charge to stick. And so she would have, so malicious intent would really have to involve some kind of deliberate action that the defendant takes that results in that person being hurt. Now, let's see, that doesn't really narrow it down because obviously that would still include reckless intent, reckless endangerment. Some level of knowledge. Peter Ellican, yes, thank you. Some level of knowledge about the wrongness of your act. So if Karen, obviously, if she tried to scare John by deliberately racing towards him, that would be second degree. If she tried to clip him, that would be second degree. There's obviously no evidence of that. If she knew that John was there and didn't call 911. So if she did return to the scene of the crime at 5:23, and if you could show that she saw John there and didn't go right away to the police, called 911 to get the ambulance, that would be second degree, I think. So, all right, let's go to another clip. All right. Let's bring it in. All right, guys.
Did the jury think the picture of Karen's car outside Meadows from the well-being check showed the taillight intact or broken? Do you even remember that question? Like at 8 o'clock, the cops went there and they got a picture of the car. The taillight appears to have part of it missing. Do you guys remember that part?
I remember that part. It's kind of interesting. We wish that we had more conclusive kind of evidence in terms of did somebody take a picture of that? We didn't really see that it was as damaged as when ultimately we saw it damaged at one point for some of us. For some of us, we believe that no, it just might be coincidental. And again, looked at the bigger picture of both individuals were there and one was operating under the influence. Somebody's dead. Somebody has some injuries, broken taillight.
Do you remember the testimony of Dighton police officer Nicholas Barros at all?
Yes.
Do you remember what he said about the taillight? When
he said it was that damaged. I think
Right.
so if anything, he kind of remembered it as, I think he said it was cracked, but he didn't say that it was significantly damaged.
That's exactly what he said. So
That's
do you
not
think that
ah.
if the defense
That's not what he said. Ugh. These guys just try to distort everything, but I'm not saying that Ronnie is trying to distort things. So again, this is where the burden is on the prosecution here, to make things clear. And it was difficult with this witness, because that's not what he said. But what he said was the taillight was largely intact, but there were missing pieces. He said missing pieces. Now, that juror doesn't remember that, and Turtle Boy obviously is never going to say it, but that's what he said. Now, people can come to the conclusion that he added missing pieces because he knew the prosecution needed that. I don't know, but that's definitely what he said. But you have to understand what he would have seen. 80% of that taillight was intact, still is intact. All right, that taillight, especially if you look at it from behind, most of that taillight is perfectly intact. It was undamaged. It's the corner piece. So this is why, like, when you look at the picture from the Ring video from the morning when Karen's driving away, if you look at it from the back, it's not so easy to see because most of it is intact. The missing pieces are on the corner, which is where it's shown in the SAL report. So I don't know how you overcome that, because I'll give you a suggestion how to overcome that, Mr. Brennan. All right. Think about it from the perspective of Officer Barrios from the Dighton Police. He trudges through feet of snow. That car's buried in the driveway. It's still snowing hard. And he looks at the taillight. He's not doing a study of it. He looks at the taillight from behind. We don't know that he ever went even on the right side of the car. Maybe they should try to bring that out in his testimony, but he looks at it from behind and he can't touch it. It's evidence. Snow has filled in the housing. Now, people say prove that. God damn it. I don't want to prove common sense anymore. I get tired of it. If you take an open container and put it out on your porch before a snowstorm, when you go out in the morning to get it, it's going to have snow inside it. Do I have to prove that to people? Apparently to turtle riders, I do. When you take the piece of taillight off the outer on the corner, that creates kind of a container. And that's going to fill with snow. It's a blizzard. It's coming down hard. It's blowing. So he can't touch it. He can't go in there and clean it out. So he's going to walk over and he's going to see that the taillight is 80% intact from behind. But then if you look closely on the corner, you will see it's missing pieces. How clearly he's not doing a study of it. He's not part of the cars team. He's not even connected to the investigation. So in his report, he did not say cracked. In his report, he put damaged right taillight. That's it. Now, you might say, why didn't he put missing pieces? He's not part of the cards team. He's not preparing for a trial. He's just doing what cops do. All right. Damaged taillight. Let's go home. It's not his assignment. He's there just to make sure that the town brings in a plow to plow the driveway so they can remove the taillight. And he's there as a courtesy. The state police don't just want to show up there. But again, if the state police were at that point planning to tamper with that taillight, to pry pieces of it, they would not. Michael Proctor would not have called the town of Dighton and said, can you have a trooper there? I'm not a trooper. Can you have a local cop meet us there? Why would you do that? If you know your next task is to tamper with that thing, you're not going to call the local cop to have him meet you there. You're going to go tamper with it and then call the local cop. So you're going to go there and you're going to pluck your pieces out and then call the Dighton police and said, hey, we need a tow. but you do your dirty work first. Common sense, people, just common sense. Okay, so before I go to the next clip, how could we bring this out how could you do a better job bringing this out for the jury? I had an idea how to do it. Now I forgot it. That's why you should always say your ideas before you go talking. What was I going to say? I did have an idea how to do that. Well, fortunately, Brennan doesn't need my ideas, but oh, okay. Very simple. What I would do if I was Brennan is I would show there's a little risk in this too, I guess, but I would show Officer Barrios the picture from the Sally port, just like Lally showed that very effectively to Kerry Roberts. Show it to him and say, is this kind of what you saw, although it was obviously filled with snow? I think that could be a very effective way to just completely eliminate Officer Barrios from this. Oh, there's still a few seconds left in this clip, so let me play it. And I apologize for the choppiness. It maybe once you play a lot of videos, the computer needs a reboot, and I don't want to do that during the show. So I've closed down everything, and hopefully that'll improve. But it may just need a reboot, so I don't know. But it seems to be enough that we can get away with it.
Fence, and I've criticized them for this too. That I think they should have gone for the glory there and asked him on cross-examine because they didn't cross-examine him. They were very satisfied with his testimony, so they didn't cross-examine him. And I think they should have asked him, did the taillight, when you saw it, look like this? And then show the car in the Sally port all destroyed. Do you think that would have been an effective way for the defense to communicate to the jury that this taillight was meddled with?
I believe that would create reasonable doubt for members of the jury.
Okay.
Oh, so actually Turtle had the same idea that I did. He just thinks it's going to be a different result. Now, I don't know why this juror would say that that's going to create reasonable doubt, because what if Officer Barrios says, yeah, that's what I saw? And that's very likely what he's going to say. So, all right. Well, a couple of times it's happened tonight that I'm on the same page as Turtle. I am on the same page here. I just think it'll be different results. I still got that song Anarchy in the UK in my head from listening to the Sex Pistols earlier.
Thank you. Danielle sends $10. Says, did the jury think Karen backing into Officer O'Keefe's vehicle could have caused the damage? Did you guys discuss that at all? About, like, she's on video hitting this car when she goes out.
We saw the video, but I think what caused a lot of individuals to kind of dismiss that was there was no evidence of any pieces there. It would have been nice if somebody had looked there and said, ooh, we found some glass pieces, taillight pieces in that area as well. But we do all agree that, yes, there was a tap there, but I don't know if the tap occurred and it wasn't clear. Again, if somebody was an expert who showed that her vehicle, the taillight sticks out just enough that if it had tapped his vehicle in that area, it would have caused some sort of damage to his vehicle and then some sort of damage to her vehicle.
Interesting. Mary sends $10. Thank you.
All right. That's an excellent point, Ronnie. That's an excellent point. And so there's a tap, and he has to show not only that the way those vehicles lined up, that it could have caused damage to the taillight, but also could have caused damage to John's Traverse. Now, so part of that would be if the collision was of enough speed to cause damage to the taillight, wouldn't it also cause damage to the Traverse? Now, I don't say that it automatically was. So Sean McDonough, this is an area we disagreed. He kind of like the ARCA guys would say the fundamental laws of physics. I don't know if me or Sean really know too much about the fundamental laws of physics. If you're listening, Sean, I don't know. Physics probably isn't my bag or your bag, but I do know that I was in an accident myself pulling out and hit my brother-in-law's truck, big size pickup truck, a few years back. And it put a dent in the, I didn't realize he was parked out behind the garage, and it put a dent in it, in his truck, but it didn't even put a scratch in the bumper of our car. Not even a scratch. So that does happen. So it's not automatic that a collision that cracks or does damage to the taillight would also do damage to the traverse. But there is, that doesn't, but you have, that's why you have an expert come in and find out if she backed into it, where was that contact, and would that, because it's possible, for instance, now in my case, it didn't cause damage to our car because it was the bumper that hit a panel on my brother-in-law's car. So that would explain why there was no damage to our car, is because it was the bumper. But that's why you go and look and see exactly what the contact was between the Traverse and the Lexus and make that conclusion. Turtle didn't seem to like that one. I go through this extra step of removing that video so that you won't see any identifying information from people that send it to me.
Is for a living, etc. And in order to find Karen Reed guilty of manslaughter, you have to listen to the ARCA experts and say, I don't believe them. So how did 8 jurors reach the conclusion that those guys didn't know what they were talking about?
It was as a direct result of Karen was there at that time, and John was there at the time, and it was believed that John died there, therefore, right, at that location, and therefore it seemed like, and everybody, all the witnesses were suggesting that he was never inside the house, and as a direct result, the assumption, or if you connected the dots based on the evidence that was provided to us, it seemed like there was some sort of collision with the car, and therefore there was damages to the vehicle. And with the damages to the vehicle, and that both individuals were there and present, that the cause must have been, or somehow, some sort of involvement by Miss Reed. So that was how they all arrived at.
But how did they reconcile? Was the ARCA testimony brought up by the people that thought that she was not guilty? Did they? I'm sure somebody in that room must have said, but these experts are telling us that that's not possible. And what was the answer to that? Like, did people say that these guys are bullshit artists, that they're fake doctors? Like, what was the reason not to believe them?
I think the major rebuttal was, we don't know. And that was the other thing. It was very
PhDs, they do this for a living, etc. And in order to find Karen Reed.
All right, it restarted there. All right. So that what I would say that is the Occam's razor argument that they're using there, and that is the idea that the simplest explanation for any event is the most likely explanation that's true. So John is found dead at the scene, more or less where he was dropped off, and the physical evidence from the vehicle was connected to it was found at the crime scene. That's the most likely explanation, right? And that's the challenge that this defense will always face, is you have to posit even just at the face of it, even if you're just zooming over from the 2,000-mile view, you have to believe that something that's really unlikely happened in order to accept the defense theory, in order to accept that Karen didn't do it. And he only went into some of that there, but there's obviously a lot more. So, for example, he could have gone into, what are the odds that someone's going to leave someone on their own lawn alive to die? That's nuts. And it's just a lot of other very unlikely things. So the Occam's razor argument is very powerful in this case.
John's Wi-Fi when the accident supposedly happened, and the 3 flights of stairs that he went up and down. So yeah, because I always bring up the 3 flights of stairs thing. To me, that's the biggest piece of evidence. Putting John inside the house is Apple Health data shows him going up and down 3 flights of stairs. Did the Apple Health data come up at all?
I think had there been an expert to provide us some information on accuracy of that kind of data when somebody's actually walking up the stairs, or could it be mimicked by movement of the individual inside a vehicle going into a different plane, so I think those were pieces that were not very clear.
An expert obviously could have clarified that if from Apple or something, if they could find an expert, or somebody who just uses Apple Health data. For like a lot of people, personal trainers use Apple Health data for their clients. They have to use, monitor, show me that you guys got your steps in, blah, 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 blah. Nobody brought that up and says, hey, wait a minute. I use Apple Health data all the time, and I don't go.
So we couldn't do any kind of investigation on our own after we got some data or some evidence or testimony. But that was definitely in some of our minds. Like, we kind of wished we knew more about it. Like, does it matter if I go in an elevator? Will it pick it up? Or does it need to be, I need to actually actively be walking and then go up the stairs?
See, that's the elevator is a great example, but I've used many different examples over time. And from Turtle Boy's face, he gives that kind of free Karen Reed face there, right? Like he's never thought about it. But that's the bottom line, is that health app has to interpret what you're doing. It doesn't have a drone flying around watching what you're doing. It has to interpret it from signals. It doesn't know whether you're roller skating, whether you're golfing, driving a golf cart, walking your dog. Well, it would know in theory, it knows if you're walking, right? So another one of the deceptive things that the defense team did in this case is David Yannetti, I think it was Yannetti, asked Rich Green, how accurate is Apple Health app? And Rich Green, again, just another example of this is the problem with defense teams finding shady experts. Rich Green said, these tests have shown that the Apple Health app is 99% accurate. Wow. That's bullshit. All right? Because what the tests show is that it's 99% accurate at calculating your number of steps if you go for a walk. So if you go walk for a mile, the health app is going to be 99% accurate at determining how many steps you took. That's all those tests show. But that's if you're running the test where you actually are walking. Nobody's running the test to say, well, if I go roller skating and this thing comes up and says I did X amount of steps, that's not part of the test. It's not testing the accuracy of how well it is at interpreting what you're doing. Rich Green knew that. David Yannetti knew that. But they're trying to trick the jury. Now, David Yannetti's job is to try to trick the jury, but it shouldn't be the job of an expert. But that's the kind of experts that defense teams get. And I'm sorry, certainly Dr. Russell would have done something similar there and gave a deceptive answer like that. And frankly, so would the ARCA guys. All right, let's continue with it.
So I think we kind of discussed that, or it was talked about, but not extensively. And it would have been nice, again, to have it as part of testimony with an expert witness.
Now, what if the defense had offered testimony from Karen Reed's phone that showed that Karen Reed's Apple Health data does not show that she was ascending and descending 3 flights of stairs during the time in which John O'Keefe was. Wouldn't that prove to you, because it's a controlled
Now, this is a good question, a good point. So we'll come back to it.
situation there, that they weren't in the same place, that one of them had to be in a house and the other one wasn't, because that wasn't introduced.
Yeah, that would be compelling evidence in that they had to be in the same sort of scenario. So both data points would be similar, if not the same.
Right. Take notes, Alan Jackson. I mean, I don't know why they didn't bring that up, because that
I can tell you why they didn't bring it up, because it probably did show the same thing. You think Alan Jackson is an idiot? No, he's not. Neither is David Yannetti. None of those people are idiots. Karen's not an idiot. If that phone extraction from Karen's phone showed something similar, that she was going up and down stairs, that's I don't know, because obviously the prosecution had that extraction too, and if the phone showed if Karen's phone also showed her walking up and down stairs at the same time as John's, then you would think the prosecution would have brought it up, right, to say, see, aha. But here's the thing: it's actually not the way what Ronnie is saying here is rational, but not correct. But I also think he probably understands this too, because of the example he used in the elevator. So it's a good place to start on that, to say whatever circumstances fooled John's phone, since Karen was in the car with him, did it fool her phone too? But unfortunately, it's not that simple, because the phone, I wouldn't have known this before this case, right? But I did a lot of research in it, not far from an expert on it, and I wish, and maybe they should, one side or the other, bring in, or both, bring in some kind of expert on this. But unfortunately, it's not just a matter of changing elevation. There's a complex series of algorithms that are interpreting multiple streams of data to try to determine what you're doing. Now, if Karen's phone and John's phone were both doing the same type of motion in that car, then they should probably end up concluding that that the health app should conclude they were doing the same activity. So, for instance, let's say Karen put her phone in her pocketbook and John put his phone in his pocket. Then the conditions that the input information going into that phone should be very, very much the same or very similar, so that it should have the same report. Unfortunately, that's not really the way it works, because we know John had his phone in his hand because they were using his phone to navigate through ways to get to 34 Fairview. And your phone, one of the sensors that it uses to try to, this is an important part actually of trying to determine what the health app uses to try to figure out what you're doing. Very important thing is your motion. And so if you're speaking animated with your health app sees that type of motion that as similar to stair climbing, because stair climbing is not just changing elevation. And it's not just a certain speed of changing that elevation. It's also a certain motion that goes as you go up each stair. And the phone can detect that. But that's the kind of thing that can be fooled if you're talking with your phone in your hand and your hand is animated. Now, I don't know. I didn't know John O'Keefe. I don't know if he normally spoke in an animated way with his hands. His mom's Italian. Pretty good chance he did, but I don't know. But also, if they're in an argument, seems like good chance they were. More likely you're doing that. But he is also definitely moving the phone around to look at it and to read the ways, or look at the map. So the circumstances of John's phone were not exactly the same as Karen's phone. Probably her phone was either sitting on the console or it was in her pocketbook or in her jacket. So it wasn't the same. But it's interesting how neither side brought that evidence into play. You would think that one side or the other would have brought that evidence into play, and they're not stupid. So if so, I mean, you would think that if Karen's phone, actually, you know what? The answer is probably this: Karen had her location data turned off, and I'm going to guess that health app doesn't work without that. That's probably the easy answer. Does that make sense, guys? Let me take a quick break and look to see what you guys say in chat. Does that make sense to you guys? I'm looking, so I haven't been able to look at chat because I'm doing these videos, but I'm looking now. Looking at you guys. Does that make sense to you guys? We know for a fact that her location data was turned off. So see if anybody knows. Maybe you can look this up. If somebody wants to go to Bing Copilot or Chat GPT, thank you, Heather. See if there's any answers on that. If your location data is turned off, is the health app still able to work? Is it still able to measure things? I'm going to guess that it doesn't. We know for a fact that her location data was turned off. That's why there's no GPS on her phone. And it's not suspicious. It was turned off for some time. She probably had turned it off for the Aruba trip and forgot to turn it back on. But so far it makes sense to Beach Nance and Heather. Is anybody Hillbilly Nitro? Are you listening, my man? Did you enter this in? Ashley, did you guys enter this in to see if ChatGPT has any answers on this? I use usually Bing's version of ChatGPT, which is I'm in Edge browser and it's right on the Copilot. Anybody get an answer on that? He would have been in his phone in his hand, texting Jen. Yep, texting, calling, checking ways, exactly. So, but I am surprised that Karen's health app data, if it was collecting data, should have helped one side or the other. Didn't see anything on it. Did you try searching it? Hopefully you guys can search for me. Just, type in some kind of question. Does the Apple Health app work if location data is turned off? Has anybody got my back? Thank you, KP, and thank you. You know for what? I'm trying not to say it because I never know what anonymity people want. But you've sent these clips. A lot of other people have sent me clips too. I'm probably not going to have time to get to them just because there's so many clips. This takes time, it's getting uncomfortable sitting here a little bit, so I can't do it all night. But anybody get any results yet? It should be pretty simple. Just go to ChatGPT or Gemini from Google or Grok from Twitter and just ask it. I could ask it myself. I'm being lazy. I'm sorry. But I figured it'd be easier for someone else to do it. All right. Thank you, Ashley. So Ashley says most Apple Health data can still be tracked even when GPS is turned off. All right. So that it remains a mystery then. We don't know why one side or the other, because you would think that Karen's health app data must have helped one side or the other, even if it wouldn't have been conclusive. Thank you, Ashley. Thank you. So I don't know. The most logical answer is that her health app data was not working because it would have helped one side or the other. If her health app did not show stair climbing, then the defense would have used it in trial. If it did show stair climbing, then the prosecution would have used it. So why is it that neither side used it at all? They're not stupid. So I'm going to guess that for some reason her health app was not getting any data. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Karen's was off because she had a tryst with data. Why did she think John was going to check his phone data? I don't know. Maybe. They got into her phone in August of 2022. Oh, Ashley had some more and I didn't see. Let's see. Ashley says All right, let's put the coast up. As many health metrics like steps, heart rate, and activity levels are primarily measured by the device's internal senses. All right, so the GPS is not the answer. That doesn't solve the riddle. So I don't know. Is there a way to turn off your health app data? I don't know. So is it possible that the state didn't get that data? We did find, that's thank you, Francesca. That's really interesting because if you remember, most recently there was a motion by the prosecution. I don't even think it was a motion, but they formed the court out of an abundance of cautionary respect that so when Karen, I want to address this too. All right, let's go into the all right, let's go. So when Karen's phone was taken roughly 4 p.m. on the day John died. The troopers took it and brought it into evidence. 3:30, maybe 3:30, 3:30, 4 o'clock. And then she didn't give them the password. So they have to hook it up to a machine. I forget what it's called. Grayscale or something. I forget. And it cycles through all the passwords, but it takes time. And so it didn't actually crack the code and get into her phone until August. And then in August, so now Michael Proctor has the phone. He begins going through it. But he very quick, Greystoke. I knew it was Gray. Thank you, Peach Nance. I love you. And Ken, man, too. You guys are awesome. Oh, Gray Key. So is it Greystoke or Gray Key? It could be both. I know there's the word gray in it, though. And so once he got in, he found an attorney-client privilege. And all right, I'll pull that up, Michael. And I'll get to it after. So once he got into the phone, he found a message we know that he found an attorney-client privilege message. So this means there was a message between Karen and her lawyer already that day. And for that reason, because of the privilege, that had to be sent to the Tate team. So the phone was sent to the Tate team. And it sounds like the Tate team did an extraction, but never sent to the prosecution the full extraction material. So that's what Brennan is trying to get now. So I don't know. Maybe they possibly didn't have the health app. That would seem weird to me. But we have to consider the possibility. So before I get to Michael McCarthy's comment, so interesting thing. Now, and I'm only going to I think it's fair to bring this up now. Somebody was just addressing this recently. I don't know if it was Turtleboy or whoever was addressing this on Twitter. But this is something that I've known about from multiple excellent sources. And this is a text from Karen to David Yannetti. Now, I've known about this for, I don't know, a year and a half, almost. And I really don't ever mention it on the show for the reason being that I have not seen this message. So even though it comes from good sources, I couldn't be sure that it was true, or not just true, but completely accurate. So if there's something similar to the text message, that I'm going to tell you about this in a second. And many of you already know about it, but a slight change in the way it was worded can make all the difference in the world. So again, without seeing the message, it seems unfair to Karen for me to talk about it. So I generally haven't. And the other reason is obviously it's inadmissible anyways as attorney-client privilege, so it's never going to be in the trial. So I've avoided talking about it. Pretty strictly avoided talking about it. Occasionally it's come on the channel and I've talked a little bit about it without going into it, but I've really avoided it. So in the Vanity Fair article, Karen addressed it herself. So maybe that opens the door here. So I know I'm going to, maybe for the first time, I don't remember if I've discussed it specifically. So now that she's opened the door, I'm going to consider it open. So what I was told by multiple sources, and they all quoted this the same way, but again, I didn't see the text myself, was that day, Karen texted David Yannetti, I didn't think I hit him that hard. Again, I can't confirm that. Never seen it. But and here's the thing. So Karen said addressed this in the Vanity Fair article. And what she said was, I never texted David Yannetti that day. But that has to be a lie. That has to be a lie. Because Karen had her phone taken that day. So the only communications she could have had with her lawyers could have been on January 29th. The only communication on that phone could have been on January 29th because the phone was taken around 4 o'clock. And Michael Proctor, the reason he turned it over to the taint team was because there was an attorney-client communication. That's why he turned it over to the taint team. Now, I'm not saying that he told anybody we read. I have no reason to think that he did. I don't know. But we know that officially, that's why he turned it over to the taint team. So there absolutely was a communication between Karen and at least one of her lawyers, and her only lawyer at that point was David Yannetti. It had to be. That's why it went to the taint team. So which leads to the next question. If there was a communication, why does Karen feel the need to bring this up in the Vanity Fair interview and lie about it? Why is it? So the only thing you can conclude from that is that there must be something in that text that is incredibly damaging to Karen Read. Not now, it's inadmissible. But if it got out, it would harm her PR campaign. So that adds a lot of credibility to the idea that message is accurate. It's something in that message that damages Karen Read enough that she feels like she has to bring it up in the Vanity Fair interview and lie about it. Because we know there was an attorney-client privilege message found. That's why it went to the taint team. And they had the phone that day. So any communications on that phone had to come that day. It's just the way it is. All right, let's get to Michael McCarthy's comment. He says, in your early videos, you were very skeptical of the evidence. And at what point, I think he means, were you convinced of your opinion now? And did you see something new to make you change? Thanks, brother. Okay, Michael, thank you very much. I'm glad to take that question on. So one of the themes of my book, and I would say the theme of my channel, is that I am ignorant, right? I was ignorant. And we are all ignorant about many, many things in life. How the sausage is made, we don't know. And when it comes to like hot dogs, we probably don't want to know. But I use the example of voting. I've been voting all my life. I vote in person. I walk into the poll. I give them my name. They give me a ballot. I fill it out. And then I drop it into some ancient-looking wooden box. What the hell happens to it? I don't know. Are there little Keebler elves inside that box that's sorted out? Maybe. I don't really know. Is it all machine processed? Is that ballot box that I put it into? Is there an electronic connection from that box to some central storage in there? I have no idea. It's a mystery to me. So that's how it was with this case, and that's how it is for most of us, even most people in law enforcement, right? So what do we know about forensic data? Nothing. What do we know about autopsies? Nothing. What do we know about homicide investigations? What do we know about the evidence room? I never heard about the evidence room until Tully and Proctor and Buchanan described it in trial. And then it made perfect sense. You understand, oh, yeah, obviously, the evidence room is not at some state police barracks. It's at the DA's office. That's where the lawyers are that are going to prosecute the case. Where else would it be? Now, eventually, some of that evidence gets put into the state police system because it has to be sent to a state police lab where there are specialists to do some testing on it. There's no labs inside a prosecutor's office. But this is all just logical. But I didn't know until the trial on that. So this is a learning process. Now, at the beginning of this case, knowing nothing about forensic data, I thought data was just data. So when I looked at Turtle Boy's article, there were a lot of things in it that looked a little suspicious. But the thing for me that was really like powerful was the 227. And the way it was presented in that article was, though, this is just data. That's not in dispute. The prosecution is not disputing it. This is just data. And if Jen McCabe or anybody like that had made that search at 227 when they supposedly didn't know John was out on the lawn dying, yeah, there would be a conspiracy. So that's why I started on that side. But even then, if you go and look at things that I was posting on Reddit, and then things I wasn't doing any live shows then. I was doing scripted recorded shows that I was putting up, or a series called Framed with a question mark, because I wasn't sure. But then when I heard Adam Lally say in court that we have our own independent forensic data expert that says 220, there was no search at 227, that all of those searches happened at 623. Okay, all bets are off. Now I don't know what the truth is on the data. So for now, at that moment, I'm like, all right, now we have to start thinking harder about the logic of this case. And certainly the defense didn't dispute that there were 3 searches made. One was at 227 and the other one was at 623, 624, the other 2. And so neither side was disputing that. Well, it was already much more logical that all 3 of those searches were made at the same time. And the defense wasn't disputing that at least 2 of them were made at 623. So it already seemed logical that all 3 of them were made at the same time, because there were slight variations of the spelling. So therefore, and then once you add the prosecution saying they have an expert that can explain this glitch that produced the 227, you had to start leaning that way if you were logical. And now you really start digging into the logic of the case. How the hell, why would people decide to deliberately kill somebody by leaving them alive on their own lawn? That seems crazy. How did the phone get on that lawn and be found underneath John's body, even though it stopped moving at 12:32 and 16 seconds? How do you explain that? And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out hypothetical ways, right? Did Brian Albert's an elite cop? Did he know that phone would eventually be used to track? So he tossed the phone out in the yard, and then later on, when they brought John out, they called the phone to light it up so he didn't know where it was and put John with the phone. You play around with ideas like that. But again, like this juror here, start at the fundamental evidence. Now, what I tried to find all summer and couldn't until maybe September was, where was the Lexus all day? Could anybody have tampered with it? And I went through this earlier with you, so I'm not going to go over it again. But I didn't get the answers to that until maybe late August, early September. Started to piece that together with help from the documents primarily, and then talking to people. So once I knew where the Lexus was, I was like, there's no conspiracy here. There was no opportunity to plant evidence. So that's when I flipped. That's when I flipped for good. And I was already leaning towards the conspiracy. So I was being cautious. Away from the conspiracy. And I was being cautious because I had a team that grew up around me, about 12 people, 2 co-hosts, Dave McGrath and Aaron Warshauer. And they both were very strong free Karen Reed. And most of my audience was. Everybody on my team was. So I was being cautious, but Dave sensed it, and he finally said, listen, gun to your head. This is maybe around August 1st. Gun to your head. What do you think? I said, I think she did it. But I was still on the fence, and it was important to me to cover it from a point of view from being on the fence and look at each piece of evidence independently. And then middle September, late September, the state released a document that showed the GPS, and the GPS showed that John never went in the house. And when you looked at that, you really can't. It's hard to just ignore that. And once you research the accuracy of GPS, you can't ignore that. I'm sorry, Jackie. It's because I actually had that on pause, so I'm going to play it again. I paused to answer the question.
It seems completely relevant to me that Karen Reed's phone data did not mimic John O'Keefe's when it should, right? If he didn't go inside the house. So, next up, it says what?
All right. Let's go to, I guess, one more clip. I'm really getting kind of tired here. It's been almost 3 hours. It's been 3 hours, actually. So let's just, for everybody that sent me clips, thank you very much. I didn't get to all of them. It's just too hard to get through everything, but I really do appreciate it. And let me hide this comment. And so this will be the last clip. And I apologize for that. I just running out of time. And after I finish this clip, I'll take a couple of questions and then I have to call it a night. So thank you very much for being here, guys. Let's play this clip. Oh, it's a long one, too. 3 minutes and 34 seconds.
Did anyone believe the taillight could have been planted?
I think people were thinking it, and that's why we looked at the timeline. We took a long time looking at video on what time the SARF team actually got there.
The CERT team, yeah.
Right.
Because you guys asked for that. You asked for the CERT team report. That was one of the questions.
Because we wanted to look more in detail of what the report actually had. Unfortunately, that wasn't provided to us. We didn't get that report. But essentially, we wanted to see some more specific timeline to try to narrow down if there was any possibility that somebody could have broken the tail light from the garage and then kind of brought it to that location prior to the team getting there.
And you were unable to do that because they did not provide you the CERT team report because there was no report.
We were actually we kind of looked at it in terms of timeline based on the trooper's testimony. And then because like I said, we took notes. So some people were taking notes. It was timeline there and we were writing down times.
Mm-hmm.
And then the video of the car being towed from their house, her dad's house, and then bringing it to Canton PD.
Because it was towed at 4:15. The CERT team search began at 5:45. And I think most people would agree that's more than enough time to get the car from Dighton to Canton. And so it is mathematically possible to do that.
And this is just a perfect example of how this guy does not care about the truth, as the anonymous lawyer was talking about. Because he's just going to gloss over the fact. He's going to say, he's just going to give you what time it left and how long it would take to get there, leaving out that there was a snowstorm, a blizzard, and it was rush hour, and it's a tow truck. But most importantly, leaving out the fact that the surveillance video shows it arrived at 5:31, pulled into the garage at 5:36, and the garage door closed at 5:42. He's just going to not tell this juror that because he doesn't want them to know. And so, I mean, I want to say, Rainey, are you still here? And there's still a little more in this clip again, so I'm going to play it. Rainey, I don't know if you're still here, but this is the stuff I know you're a big fan of Turtle Boy. The guy doesn't tell you the truth, all right? He's not telling you the whole truth, which is the same as not telling you the truth. He's intentionally leaving out information that he knows. He wants to try to make it seem like there was time to get that taillight piece from the Sally port to the crime scene and bury it 3 feet down in the snow. There was not time, and he doesn't want to give you that evidence. He wants to just skip over it and ignore it. That's not what a truth seeker does. Now, if you're a truth teller and you still want to try to make an argument for a possibility of planting, well, then you try to do that, but don't just ignore the fundamental evidence. So, for instance, maybe you want to say, "Hey, I don't trust that I don't trust that Sally Port video. Maybe they rigged the time on it, so it's not accurate." Say that. But the fact that you're just going to ignore it, he's not a truth seeker, Rainey. And I hope you understand that. I don't. If you're to say that he believes in this, if you believe in it, why do you have to skip over the truth? Why do you have to skip over the key elements? It's not a truth seeker. Just not. All right, we finish the clip. There's about a minute and a half left.
Now, what you did not know, what was not brought to your attention as a jury, was that during the pretrial phase of this, that Michael Proctor's report initially said that the car was towed from Karen Reed's house at 5:30. If the car was towed at 5:30, we all agree not enough time to have taillight planted. And they changed that later. Once the Dighton police came forward with the police report showing that the car was towed at 4:15, the Commonwealth abruptly changed their story, and they said that's a Scrivener's error on Michael Proctor's part, that it went from, he meant to put 4:15, but he actually put 5:30, so we're just going to erase that and put 4:15. If that had been brought to your attention, do you think that would have affected how jurors felt just about the truthfulness of the Commonwealth?
I think the more holes that are put into the prosecution's testimony, then it would again lead more to a reasonable doubt. The only other thing that would have been nice is, and we all know this, whenever somebody gets towed, the tow operator is supposed to make sure that they kind of document damages to the vehicle so that they can't be kind of responsible or can kind of make sure that, they can document any damages to the vehicle. So that would have been also helpful to have that tow operator is documentation.
Now.
Right. All right. So let's take the headphones off, put on the Canton Fire Department hat. Yeah, it matches pretty good with my Patriots sweatshirt. The hat was a gift. Thank you. There are more clips, but that's all I have time to get to. So there's some interesting stuff there. Just got to put this headphones on the charger. I wondered too if there was a note the tow truck driver did, because your car broke down and you're getting towed to the shop in a vehicle being towed by the state for the state police. So you're towing this, you're towing this for state police doing an investigation. So I don't know if there's the same policy of writing down an inspection of it, because there's no insurance companies involved here. So I'm not sure, but I gotta assume that if there was some kind of a tow report, then that would be in discovery. So yeah, it was not right. Ken says it was not a typical tow. Right. This was done by the state police. So I mean, it's a reasonable thing for the juror to speculate on, but again, you have to put things in that basket of things that might seem a little odd and then weigh it all later. And so the fact that Michael Proctor initially put down the time of the tow as 5:30, I'm not dismissing that as potentially relevant. When you start out looking down all of your evidence, you say, is that relevant? And I would have say back in the summer of 2023, early on, that would have been something that I would have a list stacked up with all the things in my head of things, or in that basket, that imaginary basket of odd things or things that could be relevant, right? But you're filling up that other basket with all the evidence, and that includes timelines, and that includes logic. So the timeline of showing that there was no reasonable opportunity to tamper with the vehicle. That's big. You have a lot of evidence that shows that that taillight was missing pieces. It's fairly clearly missing pieces when it pulls out at 5:08. It's described vividly by Jen McCabe, but also by Kerry Roberts, who is a close friend of the O'Keefe family, not even hypothetically part of any murder conspiracy, not connected to the Alberts or the McCabes. And she was shown a picture of the taillight by Adam Lally, and a picture of the taillight from when it was in the Sallyport. And she said, and he asked her, "Is this what you saw?" And she says, "That's exactly what I saw." So, and then you have the image of it at 8:22, the image of it when it's moved on to the tow truck. There's just so much evidence that the taillight was missing pieces that I don't really, the only thing that can explain to me how people who don't believe that that taillight was missing pieces all day is just the power of the desire to believe something. That's the only thing I can think of, because there's just so much evidence that shows that that thing was in pieces. Now, Adam Lally chose not to play the ultimate evidence. Karen told Gretchen Voss in an audio that is in discovery. She described when she showed the video, looked at the driveway, looked at the video in the driveway with Kerry and Jen. She described how it was exactly as Kerry Roberts described it: missing substantial pieces, wires exposed, heavily damaged. And she, in fact, described plucking out a piece and dropping it in the driveway. Now, why would she tell that story? She didn't understand her own, and her lawyers were all present, all three of them. Why didn't they? None of them understood at the time that they wanted to say it was just cracked. They didn't think of that. They didn't think of it. So as late as the summer of 2023, they were letting Karen tell the story that she had plucked a piece out and dropped it in the driveway. And the reason she told that story was she wanted to prove that the police lied, because the state police later not that day, but later in the week, investigated the driveway and they didn't find any pieces. So she wanted to say that she wanted to point to that as evidence that they lied. Now, that's why Adam Lally in the trial, it never came up, because for some reason, they decided not to use that tape. But it came up in the trial. He kept showing, he made a point of showing the extensive efforts to remove the snow in that driveway. So the shoveling, first by Camerano, then by Paul O'Keefe, and then the snow blowing. Like, why would they show the snow blowing? Adam Lally went out of the way to show the snow blowing of that driveway. Why? Because if it came up, why didn't the state police find that missing piece? Because the snow was removed and scattered with a snowblower and shoveled. It ended up somewhere on the lawn, on the street, that it wasn't found. It's probably still sitting there today. But in any case, the taillight was missing pieces, period. Just got to do a better. I think it was presented at trial, but Brennan's going to make sure that's much more clear to the jury. All right, guys. Been over 3 hours. Any questions before I get off? Oh, I see if there's any more thank yous I owe. Claire Marie. Thank you very much, Claire Marie. As always, I appreciate your support. Thank you, Claire Marie. And welcome to new member, Scorpio Unicorn. And they're all going to run with this. I'm telling you, you get nothing for your membership. No soup for you. No, I mean, you're doing it to support me, and I appreciate it. So you get my undying appreciation. And someday we'll all get together in a place when people are no longer worried about Tom's CPU being out there filming, and I'll buy everybody a beer. So how's that? So Roberta, you want to run with that? Is there some way maybe Roberta can make some kind of fun with that? Kevin from Yellow Cottage Tales is trying to get people drunk. He's trying to offer them to buy him a beer. And he talked about heroin on the show. I'm trying to help you, Roberta, because you aren't capable of analyzing the case. So I'm trying to give you material. So just say thank you. Gene says we need to go before. Listen, I'm game, but I just know that what's going to happen is that they're going to catch wind of it, and they're going to have Tom CPU out there taking video, and many of the people want to remain anonymous. They don't want to end up seeing their video or their picture in Twitter. So we can do it, but I mean, I'm not anonymous, so it's not a problem for me. It's too late for me to be anonymous, but I don't know for everyone else. Michael McCarthy says everything else needs to be clear at trial. Yeah, agreed, Michael. Yep, everything has to be clear. And there is a hearing this Tuesday, right? So we'll be on that. Was Roberta on My 600-Pound Life? I don't know anything about that. Don't worry about it, Michael. We don't have to know who Roberta is. She's just someone that has developed a very strange obsession. I don't know if I don't know. It's a strange obsession that came out of nowhere. So it almost feels like a jilted love interest, like someone that was interested in you and you didn't reciprocate that interest, so they get mad. I don't know if that's what it is. Envy because I can wear a hat. I don't know. It never has made sense, but it may just be as simple as she can't generate content for her own channel, so she tries to jump on mine. And her show is, I treated her with an unusual level of respect during the trial. I didn't like her show. My people in my family that listen to these shows would listen to her show. And so I got to hear some of it from that. And I just found her analysis to be too black and white for me. The world is not black and white. And my approach, which, listen, that's why I said, if I'm not getting people mad, everybody mad, sometimes I'm probably not doing it right. Because my approach is to try to look at everything objectively. And objectively, there are going to be parts of this case that don't favor the prosecution. And that's how I cover it. That's not how she covers it. She covers it black and white. I don't want to say she's like the turtle boy of our side or something like that, but those people are all 100% black and white. And she's the same way. And that's fine. I knew she was like that, and I was just like, yeah, it's not to my taste, but I still treated her with respect when she was here. And then weirdly, all of a sudden she started doing attack videos on me. Really strange. Really strange. It's this case has been a never-ending source of, you have to try to find entertainment in it, but a never-ending source of the unexpected. Like these weird little dramas. Like, why? I don't get it. But I don't have to understand everything in life, She's still trying to say that I got the timelines wrong on the voicemail, and I didn't. But that video was put out on Innocence Fraud Watch on Rumble, which gets like 5 views. I do believe that's Roberta, but it's possible. She denies that it's her. I don't know, but she makes the same argument. So it's either her or someone very foolish that's close to her. And all the videos she puts out are asinine. They're just, so in that video, she said, Kevin Lenihan gets the timeline wrong on the voicemails. But even if you just listen to the clip that she played, you could tell she was misunderstanding it, or whoever put that up. She was trying to, so in the clip, she thinks that I said that the first voicemail to John was 12:41. That's not what I said. The first voicemail to John was at 12:37, and I said that in that video. But what I said was that in the summer of 2023, Turtle Boy, when he was getting his information directly from Karen, said that Karen got home at 12:41, and that we knew that because you can hear her pulling into the garage. And she gave details. She said you can hear the garage closing and you can hear her boots on the ground. That's all the information we knew until the trial. Then with the trial, we learned from, I think, from Trooper Garino that the first message came at 12:37. Her phone connected to John's Wi-Fi, quote, around 12:36. I wish we knew that more accurately, but that's what he said. And the second voicemail is at 12:41. And just like Turtle had reported, indeed, you do hear the garage door closing and you do hear her boots on the ground. You also hear some what sound like alarms, or, like as you're pulling in, you get those sensors, as you get near a wall. But I never said that was the first voicemail. And you can't really, if people are dumb, what can you do? Like the clip that I went on today, when she's trying to say from my show the other night, when I said that the defense attorneys were like an all-star team or something like that, and they're very qualified, but that they had a dumb strategy. A bad game plan is the way I put it. Oh, how she says in that creepy little voice, how can you say that? You just said 2 minutes ago that if they had an all-star team of lawyers, how could they possibly have a bad strategy? Are you so dumb? Because I explained in the example that it's like two excellent teams that get to the Super Bowl, and you don't get to the Super Bowl unless you're an excellent team. But you play a really bad game, like Kansas City did last week. It happens all the time. And in the case of Kansas City, they played a bad game because they had a bad game plan. And I explained that in the video. I don't know why she can't understand it. I don't know. Her lack of understanding indicates she should be a free Karen reader. So why don't you go over to their side, Roberta? You'll do better with it. Jen says she fell asleep. How dare you, Jen? I stayed up for you, and you fell asleep. I'm teasing you, Jen. Jean says her source happened. I got to scroll back to see what they're talking about. I missed it, Jean, so I don't feel like scrolling back. So we'll try to finish on that. Jean, what did your source say happened? Oh, Jen, you got the flu. It is going around. Well, be careful with that, Jen. Be careful with that. Oh, you're talking about the snapping turtle. I mean, I don't have any information on who left that snapping turtle there. Ashley's saying that Turtle Boy has cameras there, or his mother's house? He has cameras there, and so that would have picked it up. I can't confirm any of that. I don't know. Don't know. I mean, I don't know. Who knows? Anything's possible, right? We just don't know. It's very possible that he did it himself for attention. It's very possible that someone else mad at him did it. Anything is possible, and we just don't know. And I also don't know if the turtle was killed or somebody just found a dead turtle on the side of the road and hung it there. So I don't know. My King of Kings, hi, good to see you. He says Hank needs to rule out every other possibility using the evidence until only his explanation remains. That's what you want to do. Yep. The whole Sherlock Holmes thing, right? And they didn't do a good enough job of that the last time. But the most important, I think there's ways that a good juror would, a good attorney. See, you have to the evidence that's delivered to the jury has to come through the witnesses. That's how it comes through. So, especially in a long trial, there has to be little subtle ways to get the witness to kind of clue the jury into that something important was just happened. So, for example, let's say you're questioning Lieutenant O'Malley, the head of the CERT team, who said that he arrived there, I think at 4:57 or something like that. So, not that you want to overdo this, but if he says if he's going through and he says I arrived at 4:57, you stop him and you say, Lieutenant O'Malley, are you sure about that? Did you check your watch? How do you know what time it was? And just get him to answer it again. And that little, you're sending a clue to the jury. Pay note of this time. It's going to matter. And then and similarly, most importantly, when he says we found the first taillight piece at 5:45, you do the same thing. 5:44. 5:45? Did I hear you right? Is that accurate? I don't know what the trick is. So Brennan's going to have some trick to make sure that information stands out. This is an area that Adam Lally was incredibly weak at, because that monotone style of always asking questions in the same way lulled everybody to sleep. And so when important information even when he got important information to come out, it wasn't delivered in a way that created any emphasis. There's ways to create emphasis, they teach this for people that teach writing, right? So sometimes there's ways to create emphasis, for instance, by ending on the word that you want to emphasize. That's a writing trick to create emphasis. Now, there's got to be other tricks that lawyers must learn in law school. I've never been to law school, so I don't know what it is, but there's got to be tricks like that Lally doesn't seem to know. I don't know, maybe we go back and watch some of Alan Jackson's cross-examination of any witness and see what tricks he used, because he's definitely much more effective at communication. So we should. That's actually. I'm going to try that sometime. Maybe this week. I'm going to go and just randomly pick a cross-examination that maybe we'll do Jen McCabe. So Alan Jackson's cross-examination of Jen McCabe. Now, we know the one stunt that he did where he tried to get Jen to say 227 out loud. I don't mean that. But just little things where you're going through the testimony and an important piece of information comes out and you find some way to create that emphasis that'll make it stick out to the jury. I bet I didn't make a point to watch that during the trial, so I don't know. But I'm going to guess that he has little ways to do that he's very good. All right, guys. So 3 hours, 25 minutes. I am going to pay a price for this tomorrow. So I will see you all Tuesday morning. Hey, and the power didn't go out, so that's good. I think the precipitation stopped. So I don't think they're going to sequester the jury, though, Mandy. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just don't think they're going to do that. So, oh, God. Thank you, Jen. I hope you feel better. You're welcome, Ken. Have a good night. Chick from the Bricks. I haven't seen you all night. Good to see you. I don't know what her issue is, Chick. I don't really even know. I never offended that. Whatever. I never offended her. She started, and I smothered her with respect, and then she flipped for some weird reason. Very bizarre. Again, it goes back to the goose that was laying the golden egg for her was she was having Grant on the show, and Grant was saying increasingly bizarre things, but it was getting her numbers, and she wasn't challenging him. But I didn't question her for that, and I didn't even mention her show. But finally, I mentioned on a break during the trial on one of the days that Grant is saying irresponsible things, because he was. It's hanging here. And oh, that's my. I was wondering what was hanging there. He was saying irresponsible things, and I think she took offense to that. She stopped having him on after that because 98% of the people in chat agreed with me on that and did so loudly. So she looked at that and said, she was there. And so she said, oh, shit, maybe I better not have Grant on. So she never had him on again. But he was bringing her a lot of numbers. He was entertaining. And so I wasn't trying to kill the golden goose for her, but I think that's how she experienced it. And she's resentful. She's one of those extremely resentful, bitter people. But all right, guys. See you all Tuesday.